My husband said he was visiting his sick father, then I saw his face on a stranger's vacation photo. I found out my husband was cheating because of a photo posted by a woman he had never met. And honestly, if that sounds insane, it felt even more insane living through it. My husband, Brian, was 38 when this happened. I was 36. We'd been married for 11 years, together for almost 14. And we lived in a suburb outside Charlotte, North Carolina with our 9-year-old daughter, Ava. From the outside, we looked aggressively normal. Brian worked in commercial HVAC sales. I was a project coordinator for a hospital network. We had a beige 2-story house with black shutters, a Costco membership, a golden retriever named Moose, and the kind of marriage people described as solid. Not passionate, not exciting, solid, and for a long time, I thought solid was enough. Brian had always been the steady one. He wasn't overly affectionate or romantic, but he was dependable. He paid bills on time, remembered to rotate the tires on my SUV, and made a genuinely decent turkey chili. He was the kind of man who'd roll his eyes if I bought decorative pillows but would still fluff them before guests came over. If you had asked me before all this whether he was capable of blowing up our family with some elaborate lie, I would have laughed. His dad, Frank, lived alone in Wilmington after Brian's mom died. Frank had diabetes, high blood pressure, and a habit of refusing help until things got bad enough that everyone else had to scramble. Brian wasn't especially close with him emotionally, but he took his role as the responsible son seriously. He had a younger sister, Melissa, who lived in Arizona and mostly contributed opinions by text. So when Brian came into the kitchen on a Thursday night in late May and said, "I need to go down to Wilmington this weekend. Dad's not doing great," I didn't question it. I was packing Ava's lunch for the next day and asked, "What happened?" He loosened his tie and sighed like the weight of the world had settled directly on his shoulders. He called me twice during work, which he never does. Said he's been dizzy, his feet are swelling, and he's out of half his meds because he forgot to refill them. I talked to Melissa and she's useless, obviously, so I told him I'd come Saturday morning. I remember feeling bad for him. Not suspicious, just bad. "That sucks," I said. "Do you want me to come too? We could bring Ava, make it a day trip." No. He was quick about it, but not so quick that it struck me then. He gets weird when too many people are around. Plus I might need to organize some stuff at the house, maybe take him to urgent care. Maybe deal with his insurance paperwork. It'll just be easier if I go alone. I nodded. That all tracked. Frank hated being fussed over, and Brian did tend to take charge better without an audience. "Okay," I said, "just text me when you get there." "I will." He kissed the top of my head. I can still remember that part, which is almost funny now. The little domestic gestures end up feeling insulting in hindsight. Like someone patting you gently while robbing your house. He left Saturday at around 7:30 in the morning with a duffel bag and his golf polo on. Which I did notice because it seemed like a weird choice for visiting a sick parent. When I asked why he was dressed like that, he shrugged and said, "It's comfortable." I spent the day doing ordinary things. Ava had a birthday party at a trampoline park. I ran into Target for toilet paper and sunscreen. My sister Jenna called and complained about her ex for 40 minutes. Brian texted me at 10:14 a.m. "At Dad's, he looks rough." Then at 1:32. Taking him to get food and meds. Then at 6:48, long day. Probably staying over. Again, nothing weird. Frank lived 2.5 hours away. Brian had stayed over there before. I responded, "Okay, tell him I said feel better." He hearted the message. The next morning, he texted, heading back around noon. He got home around 3. He looked tired in a deliberate way, if that makes sense. Kind of slumped, kind of quiet. I asked how Frank was doing and Brian gave me enough detail to sound truthful. "Honestly, not great," he said. His fridge was basically empty, he hadn't taken his meds right. And his ankles looked swollen as hell. I think he's depressed, too. That's sad. Yeah, did he go to urgent care? Brian tossed his keys in the bowl by the door. No, he refused. You know how he is. That also tracked. For the next week or so, life went on. Brian seemed a little distracted. But his work was busy and we were getting toward the end of the school year. So everything felt cluttered anyway. Ava had a music recital. I had a scheduling nightmare at work because one of our clinics was switching software systems. Brian had one of his periodic moods where he stared at his phone more and talked less. But he'd had those before. The second, dad trip, Happened 3 weeks later. This one was more last minute. It was a Friday. Brian came home and said Frank had taken a turn, and he wanted to drive down early Saturday again. What kind of turn? I asked. He called Melissa confused, like really confused, kept repeating himself. Do you think he needs an actual doctor? Probably, yeah. Shouldn't you maybe take Ava at some point soon? He hasn't seen her in a while. Brian was pulling clothes from drawers while we talked. Let me figure out what's going on first. I offered to go again. He said no again. This time, I did feel a tiny pinch of annoyance. Not suspicion exactly. Just that familiar married feeling of being mildly offended that your spouse keeps unilaterally deciding things. Okay, I said. It just kind of sounds like you don't want us there. He stopped packing and looked at me. That's not fair. I didn't say it was personal. You kind of did. I remember folding a towel too hard and saying, forget it. He softened immediately, came over, touched my arm. Hey, I'm sorry. I'm stressed. I'm not trying to shut you out. My dad is just a lot. That made me feel guilty, which now makes me angry when I think about it. He wasn't just lying. He was managing my emotions inside the lie. He left Saturday morning, same as before. This time he wore a navy button-down and khaki shorts. Which was also not exactly helping your sick father attire, but again, I wasn't building a case. I was just vaguely irritated by his weirdly curated casual outfits. He texted less that weekend. When I asked how Frank was, he said, bad day. I'll call later. Then he didn't call until after 8 that night, and even then he sounded rushed. What's going on? I asked. I'm outside, he said. Dad finally fell asleep. I didn't want to wake him. In the background I could hear laughter and what sounded like music. Not loud club music. More like restaurant patio music. Where are you? I asked. Outside his condo complex. That should have been my moment. It should have clicked. But he answered smoothly, and when you're used to trusting someone, your brain actively rejects the shape of betrayal. It keeps sanding the edges off things that don't make sense. 2 days later, my friend Talia sent me a link to an Instagram account belonging to some woman named Marissa Cole. Talia and I had gone to college together. And she now worked in marketing for a boutique hotel group. She had around 12,000 followers, mostly local lifestyle content, brunches, girls' trips. That kind of thing. I followed her, but not closely. Her text just said, "Girl, is this Brian?" I clicked the link and it opened to a carousel of vacation photos captioned 48 hours in Charleston with my favorite people and exactly 0 responsibilities. The first few photos were standard influencer adjacent stuff. Aperol spritzes, a rooftop bar, sunset over the water, a group shot of 4 women in coordinated linen sets. Then the 6th photo stopped me cold. It wasn't even a photo of him. It was a candid of Marissa and another woman laughing in the foreground on what looked like the deck of a rental boat. In the background, slightly out of focus but still completely recognizable if you knew him, was Brian, my husband, wearing mirrored sunglasses and that navy button-down I'd watched him pack for his confused father emergency. His face was turned 3/4 toward the camera, mid-laugh, holding a drink in one hand. He looked relaxed, happy, sunburned across the nose. I stared at that photo so long my phone dimmed. At first I genuinely thought there had to be some explanation so weird and random that I just couldn't see it yet. Maybe Marissa and her friends happened to be on a public harbor cruise with him. Maybe it was someone who looked bizarrely similar. Maybe I was having some kind of stress hallucination. I zoomed in until the image got grainy. It was him. Same haircut, same shoulders, same scar near his chin from when he fell off his bike at 14. A story his mother used to tell at every holiday dinner. Same stupid sunglasses I'd bought him for Father's Day the year before. I texted Talia, "Where did you see this?" She called me immediately. "I am so sorry," she said the second I answered. I couldn't even sit down right. I ended up half leaning against the kitchen counter. "Do you know this woman?" "Only socially. She knows one of my clients. I saw her post and I was like, that looks exactly like Brian." I almost didn't send it because I thought maybe there was some totally normal explanation. "Charleston," I said out loud, like saying the word would make it less insane. "He said he was with his dad in Wilmington." There was a pause, then Talia said very carefully, "Do you want me to do a little digging before you say anything to him?" I've known Talia since we were 19. She is ethically flexible in ways that become very useful during a crisis. "Yes," I said. "Okay, don't text him yet." I didn't. Somehow I made it through picking Ava up from dance camp and getting dinner on the table. And pretending I wasn't dissociating into the hardwood floor. Brian came home around 6:30 that evening carrying groceries like a man in a commercial for normal husbands. He kissed Ava's head, asked about camp, complained about traffic, and stood in my kitchen like he had not been electronically caught drinking on a boat in another state. I watched him put strawberries in the fridge and felt like I was observing a stranger trying on my life. At one point he asked, "You okay? You've been quiet." I said, "Headache." He said, "You want me to handle bedtime?" I nodded because if he touched me I thought I might either scream or throw something. That night, once he fell asleep, I went into the guest room with my phone and a blanket. Talia had sent me a full dossier by then. Marissa had tagged the location of the Airbnb in one story the day before. One of the women in the group had a public Venmo feed showing a payment captioned, "Charleston House Split." Marissa had also posted a story from a restaurant where, in the corner of a mirror behind her, Brian appeared again, seated at a table with the group. Then Talia sent the final message. I found the reason he was there. Attached was a screenshot from Facebook. A woman named Heather Lawson had updated her profile picture 2 months earlier. She was maybe 32, blonde, pretty in a polished suburban way, with beachy waves and white teeth and that kind of expensive athleisure vibe. Her new profile picture was her leaning into Brian at what looked like a brewery patio. His arm was around her waist. My stomach actually flipped over. The photo wasn't public anymore. But Talia had found it because someone had commented on an old tagged post and it pulled the profile into a cached preview. I didn't understand the mechanics and didn't care. All I cared about was that my husband had another woman arranged against his body in a photo that had clearly been taken as a couple picture. I clicked through Heather's profile. Most of it was private, but I could see enough. She lived in Raleigh, worked in medical device sales, divorced, no kids, mutual friends with Brian. 3. I recognized one immediately, Greg Madsen, Brian's college friend. That was the moment it stopped being a suspicion and became a structure. Not an accident, not some stupid one-night thing. A structure, a network of lies with supporting beams and other people standing inside it. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove Ava to my mom's house before 9. I told her I had a migraine and needed to lie down. She took Ava happily because grandma time is apparently better than every other kind of time. Then I sat in my car in her driveway gripping the steering wheel until my hands hurt. I went home and waited for Brian to finish his morning sales call in the office. He walked into the kitchen around 10:30 with his laptop under one arm and said, "Can you believe this heat already? It's not even officially summer." I said, "Why were you in Charleston with Heather?" He stopped so completely it was eerie. No fake confusion. No. What are you talking about? Just a total physical pause, like his body had outrun his excuse inventory. Then he set the laptop down. "What?" he said. I slid my phone across the island with Marissa's boat photo open. He looked at it, picked it up, looked again, then put it back down very carefully. I will never forget how calm he tried to be. "Who sent you this? Answer the question." He rubbed his jaw. "It's not what you think." I laughed, not because it was funny. Because it was so offensively predictable that my body rejected it as language. "Okay," I said, "then tell me what I think." He looked exhausted suddenly, which I'm sure was strategic. "Heather is a client connection through Greg. We were all down there for a long weekend. I didn't tell you because I knew it would sound bad." I just stared at him. "You lied and said your father was sick." "I know. You stayed overnight." "Yes. You let me ask about him. You let me say tell your dad I hope he feels better." "You lied to my face repeatedly. Claire, do not use my name like that." He sat down at the island like he was the one who needed support. "I made a mistake. With Heather?" He didn't answer. "How long?" He still didn't answer. I said, "If you lie one more time, I swear to God I will make this so much uglier than it already is." And that got through to him. Something about my voice must have changed. Because Brian looked at me like he was seeing a version of me he had not planned for. "Since February," he said quietly. I sat down too because my knees had gone weak, which felt humiliating. "February," I repeated. He nodded once. 4 months. "Yes." "How did it start?" "At a conference in Atlanta." "Is she married?" "No. Divorced." "Does she know about me?" Another pause. "Yes," he said. That hurt in a different way. Not bigger, just dirtier. "And she was fine with that?" He looked away. She said I told her we were basically roommates. I actually slapped the countertop hard enough to sting my hand. We are not basically roommates, Brian. We were having sex 3 times a week and planning a Disney trip. I know. You brought me flowers on Mother's Day. I know. And all that time you were telling another woman our marriage was over? He said nothing. I asked about the first Wilmington trip. Then the second. Then the work dinners, the late client calls, the sudden Saturday gym sessions. Every answer widened the crater. He'd used his father as cover multiple times. He'd also used Ava once, telling Heather he had to leave early from a weekend with her because our daughter was sick, when really he was coming home to attend Ava's school art show like Father of the Year. I thought I was going to throw up. The worst part wasn't even the sex, weirdly. It was the administrative evil of it. The calendar management, the emotional compartmentalization, the way he'd learned to speak 2 contradictory lives fluently. I asked if he loved her. He took too long to answer. I care about her, he said. I got up and walked out of the kitchen because if I stayed I was going to do something that would make my life harder. He followed me into the living room, saying, "Please, just let me explain." I turned around. "No, you explain one thing. Why are you here?" He blinked. "What? If you care about her, if you've been with her since February, if you've been telling her our marriage is dead, why are you standing in my house right now acting shocked this is happening?" He looked genuinely miserable for the first time. Because I didn't want to lose Ava. I didn't want to blow up everything. I said, "You already did." He cried then, which made me colder, not softer. There is nothing less moving than a man weeping over consequences he personally handcrafted. By noon I had called my sister, my mom, and a divorce attorney recommended by one of the nurses I worked with. By 2, Brian was packed into the guest room because I told him if he slept in our bedroom again, I'd call the police and make up something creative. Not because I thought he was dangerous. I just couldn't stand the idea of him touching the comforter. That afternoon, after I got Ava back from my mom's, Brian acted like we were going to privately manage our implosion around her. He wanted to wait until we had a plan. I said no. We didn't tell her every detail, obviously. But I wasn't going to let him coast in domestic camouflage while I bled out behind closed doors. We sat her down in the den. Brian looked like someone had sanded all the color off him. Ava sat cross-legged on the rug holding one of Moose's tennis balls. I said, "Dad is going to be staying in a different room for a while because we're having grown-up problems." She looked from me to him. "Are you getting divorced? Kids are not stupid. They just don't have the same incentive adults do to pretend." Brian started crying again. I could have killed him for that. It put her in the position of comforting him. "We don't know yet," he said. Ava looked at me, and I forced myself not to cry because she already had one destabilized parent in the room. "Are you mad at Dad?" she asked. "Yes," I said honestly. "Did he do something bad?" Brian whispered, "Claire." I ignored him. He made some choices that hurt our family. Ava was quiet for a second, then she said, "Is that why you look weird?" I laughed and cried at the same time. Probably. That night, she slept in my bed. The next week was one of the ugliest of my life. I met with the lawyer on Wednesday. Her name was Dana Pierce, and she was one of those brisk, polished women who make chaos feel like paperwork. She told me to gather financial records, copy tax returns, freeze joint lines of credit if needed, and stop communicating emotionally in writing. That last one turned out to be the hardest part. Because by then Heather had entered the chat, literally. Apparently Brian had told her I found out. She messaged me on Facebook at 11:17 p.m. on Thursday. The message said, "I know you probably hate me, but I need you to know Brian told me your marriage had been over for a long time. He said you were only together for your daughter. I never would have gotten involved if I knew the truth." I stared at it for a while, then laughed the meanest laugh I've ever laughed alone. I replied, "He packed for your Charleston trip while I made our daughter's lunch and told me his father was sick." She didn't respond for almost 20 minutes. Then, "Oh my God." Then, "He said he was in Myrtle for work thing." That got my attention. I called her. She answered on the first ring sounding like she'd been crying. Hi, I said, "Just so we're clear, I'm not calling to comfort you. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I sat in my car in the garage because it was the only place I could talk without Ava hearing. "How long have you been with him?" "Since February. We met in Atlanta at that conference." "Were you exclusive?" "I thought so." "Thought so?" "I found out about another woman in March. He said it was over with her." I closed my eyes. Another woman. Not just me and Heather. Not even a neat affair. A rotating ecosystem. Who? I asked. She was somebody from Greenville, I think. He said it was casual and done. I laughed again, but there was no humor in it. Incredible. Heather sounded ashamed, which to her credit, she should have. But I also believed she was telling the truth about being lied to. She sent screenshots. So many screenshots. Brian telling her I was checked out, that we co-parent well, but there's nothing left, that he was staying for stability until after summer. Him texting her from my couch. From restaurants I'd been at with him. One message said, "Miss you already. Wish I was waking up next to you instead of in this museum of a marriage." That one actually hurt worse than the sex. Something about the creativity of the insult. I forwarded every screenshot to Dana. Then I did something petty, but in my opinion, not unjustified. I called Melissa in Arizona. She answered with her usual bored, "Hey." I said, "Did you know Brian's been using your dad as cover for an affair?" Silence. Then, "I'm sorry, what?" I explained the Wilmington lie. The fake emergencies. The Charleston trip. Melissa said, very flatly, "That son of a bitch." Apparently Frank had not been sick either weekend. Brian had called him once, casually, the morning of the first trip. And once the evening of the second. That was it. Frank, who was many things but not sentimental, was furious at being used as a prop for adultery. He called Brian while I was still on the phone with Melissa and tore into him so badly Brian came downstairs afterward white as copy paper. "What did you say to my sister?" he demanded. I was sitting at the dining table with Dana's checklist and a highlighter. "The truth. You dragged my family into this." I looked up at him. "You used your family in this." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Ava came around the corner at that exact second and asked if she could have popcorn. And all three of us froze like actors in a bad play. Brian went to make it for her. I watched him at the microwave thinking, this is the last season of something and only one of us got the script. Over the next 2 weeks, more things came out. They always do. Brian and Greg had been covering for each other on guys' golf weekends, except at least one of those weekends had been couples trips. Brian had opened a separate credit card I didn't know about. Not for some huge amount, but enough to keep dinners, hotel rooms, and gifts off our main statements. He'd bought Heather a bracelet in April. 3 days before he forgot our anniversary dinner reservation and came home with grocery store tulips as an apology. Greg's wife, Allison, called me after I texted her a very concise summary of the situation. She found enough on Greg's phone that she took their kids and went to her mother's house. I don't know whether they stayed together. Last I heard they were working on it, which to me sounded exhausting. Brian alternated between crying, apologizing, getting defensive, then acting wounded that I was being cold. At one point he actually said, "I'm still your husband," after I told him not to go through my laptop. I said, "Not in any way that matters." He slept in the guest room for 3 weeks. Then rented a furnished apartment 15 minutes away after Dana advised me that separation would make things logistically cleaner. Telling Ava he was moving out was awful in a way I can't even dress up for storytelling. She got quiet, like deeply quiet, and asked whether it was because she'd been fighting bedtime too much. Brian sobbed so hard he could barely speak, and I had to be the one to say, "No, honey, this is grown-up stuff. None of it is because of you." After he left, the house became both calmer and sadder. It was easier to breathe without him in it. It was also horrifying how quickly a person can become an absence with a billing address. The thing that surprised me most was how embarrassed I felt. Not just angry, embarrassed. I kept replaying every dinner where I'd defended him as just stressed lately, every time I'd reassured other people that we were good. Every fake father emergency I'd sympathetically repeated. I felt stupid in this deep, cellular way. My friend Rachel said, "You're not stupid." He lied professionally. And honestly, that helped more than all the "you're so strong" stuff people say when they don't know what else to say. A month after I found out, Heather texted me again. "Not asking you to answer. Just wanted you to know I ended it." He was still lying. I actually did answer that one. "What happened?" She called me instead. By then, whatever weird rivalry might have existed between us had mostly burned off, replaced by the grim solidarity of two women who had both dated the same human landfill. Apparently after I found out, Brian kept telling Heather he was moving toward divorce. For real this time, but he was also seeing someone else. Heather only found out because she noticed a woman tagging him in a brewery photo from Greenville. Not romantically, but enough to make her suspicious. She did her own digging and found messages. So while living in my guest room crying about losing his family, Brian had still been juggling women. When Heather told me that, I felt something I can only describe as relief by disgust. It snapped the last thread of self-blame I didn't know I was still carrying. Because up until then, some awful part of me kept wondering whether our marriage had failed in some special, specific way. Whether I had become boring, distracted, too practical, too something. But no, he was just greedy. There's a weird freedom in realizing someone's betrayal was not a referendum on your value. Just a demonstration of their character. The divorce process itself was not dramatic in the TV sense. No one flipped a table. No one got arrested. It was more the death by 1,000 PDF attachments version of life collapse. Acid disclosures, parenting schedules, mediation. Dana handled most of it, but every document felt like an insult translated into legal language. Brian wanted to keep things amicable. What he meant was he wanted the social and financial consequences of detonating our marriage to be as soft as possible for him. He asked if we could do family dinners sometimes, for Ava's sake. I said no. He asked if I'd consider counseling, to improve communication. I said we could communicate through the parenting app like every other divorced couple with unresolved resentment. He asked whether I was telling mutual friends private details. I said, if you wanted a better story told about you, you should have behaved better. That was maybe the meanest thing I said during the whole process, and I don't regret it at all. Frank called me a few times after Brian moved out, mostly to ask how Ava was doing. Once he said, I know he's my son, but I didn't raise him for this. I didn't know what to say to that. Parents always seem to think there's a sentence that can still fix what their grown child has become. My mom wanted me to join a divorce support group. Jenna wanted me to get bangs and sleep with a contractor. Talia wanted to build a PowerPoint titled, Timeline of a Moron. Everyone has their coping style. Mine, apparently, was repainting the bedroom. Brian hated color, so our room had been this boring gray beige for years. The weekend after he moved out, I painted it a deep muted blue by myself while Ava stayed with my mom. I got paint in my hair and on the baseboards and cried once when I found one of Brian's socks under the bed, but when I finished, the room finally looked like it belonged to a person instead of a compromise. About 3 months in, I ran into Marissa Cole at a coffee shop in South End. I recognized her before she recognized me. She was with another woman, both in workout sets, holding iced drinks the size of flower vases. I wasn't going to say anything, but then she looked up and her entire face changed. Oh my God, she said. You're Claire. I nodded. She looked mortified. I am so sorry. I had no idea. Heather told me later what happened. It's okay, I said, which was not entirely true, but none of this was her fault. She said, for what it's worth, nobody in that group knew he was married. He told everyone he was recently separated. That did not shock me. Still, hearing it from yet another source felt like collecting confirmations from the universe. Well, I said, he was not. She winced. I'm sorry. I went back to my table and sat down with my coffee and felt weirdly peaceful. Not happy. Just clearer. Every outside confirmation made the story feel less like a nightmare my brain had invented and more like a finished fact. The hardest part remained Ava. Kids process things sideways. She didn't ask a million questions. Instead, she started getting clingy on transition days when she had to go to Brian's apartment. She wanted extra reassurance about schedules. She cried once because he forgot to send back her favorite hoodie. Another time she asked, if Dad lied to you, how'd I know he doesn't lie to me? That one broke me a little. I told her, adults can make bad choices and still love their kids. But if anyone ever tells you something that feels wrong or confusing, you can always ask me. She nodded like she was storing it carefully. Brian tried very hard to become Dad of the Year after moving out. Weekend outings, matching sneakers, ice cream dinners. He showed up with a level of performative devotion that would have been almost impressive if it weren't so transparent. Ava enjoyed parts of it, because of course she did. She's 9. She likes mini golf and frozen yogurt and being fussed over. But kids also know when energy is frantic. One Sunday evening after he dropped her off, she came inside, took off her sandals, and said, Dad keeps asking if I'm mad at him. I was putting groceries away. What do you say? I say I don't know. That was such an honest, adult answer in a child's voice that I had to turn away for a second. The divorce was finalized 8 months after I found the photo. By then, Brian was living in a nicer apartment than he could really afford. Probably to maintain some illusion of intact success. Heather was long gone. I'd heard through Allison that there had been at least one other woman after her and that Brian was now taking time to work on himself. Which is a phrase men seem to use when no one currently wants to date them. He wanted to shake hands after the final hearing. I am not kidding. We were standing in the hallway outside the courtroom, our attorneys talking quietly nearby. And he stepped toward me with this bleak, solemn expression like we were closing a business deal with mutual respect. "Claire," he said, "despite everything, I hope someday we can be friends." I looked at him and saw not the man I married, but the man from the background of that boat photo, smiling in the sun while I believed he was helping his sick father. And the weird thing was, I didn't feel rage anymore. Just distance. I said, "You were willing to let me live in a fake reality so you could keep all your options open. People don't come back from that into friendship." He looked down, nodded once, and stepped back. That night I ordered Thai food, let Ava stay up too late watching a baking show, and sat on the floor of my newly blue bedroom after she went to sleep. Moose climbed halfway into my lap like he still thought he was a puppy. I opened my phone and, for reasons I still can't fully explain, pulled up the original screenshot one last time. The Charleston boat photo. Marissa laughing in the foreground. Brian in the background, unaware he was about to lose the entire architecture of his secret life because some stranger wanted to post vacation content. I stared at his face for a minute, then deleted the screenshot. Not because I forgave him. Not because I wanted to be healed and gracious and above it all. I just didn't need proof anymore. Story number 2. My hotel called asking if I was enjoying my anniversary stay. I've never been to that resort in my life. I found out my husband was cheating on me because a woman at a luxury resort in Arizona cheerfully asked whether I wanted the chocolate-covered strawberries sent up before dinner or after. That sentence still sounds fake when I type it out, and if somebody else posted this, I would probably think they were exaggerating for attention. I wish I were. I would honestly prefer to be the kind of person who makes up insane relationship stories for strangers online instead of the kind of person who has to live through them. I'm 35, my husband Derek is 39, and until about 4 months ago I would have described our marriage as boring in a way I trusted. We lived in a nice suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. Not rich, not struggling, just very middle-class comfortable. We had a 10-year-old daughter named Molly, a yellow lab that sheds like it's his job. A house with too many beige walls. And a relationship that had settled into the kind of routine where excitement mostly meant somebody remembered to buy more coffee before we ran out. Derek worked in regional sales for a medical supply company. He traveled maybe 2 or 3 times a month, usually short trips. Usually same day or one night stuff. Indianapolis, Louisville, Pittsburgh, places like that. He liked talking about airports as if he were a war veteran because he once had to spend 7 hours in O'Hare. I worked remotely doing employee benefits administration for a large insurance brokerage. Which means my whole day is basically spreadsheets, emails, and listening to people panic over enrollment deadlines they ignored for 3 weeks. We had been married for 11 years, together for 14. We were not one of those super affectionate couples who post anniversary paragraphs on Facebook and call each other my person. We were more dry humor, shared calendar, split Costco list people. Which worked for me because I'm not very theatrical and neither was he. At least not in the obvious ways. He was dependable. He was the one who remembered oil changes and soccer practice schedules and where the warranty paperwork was. If you had asked me before all this whether Derek was capable of carrying on a whole second life behind my back, I would have said no with the kind of confidence that makes me wince now. It's not that we had a perfect marriage. We'd had the same problems a lot of long married couples have. He worked too much. I got tired and snappy. We argued about money in that stupid nickel and dime way couples do when the real issue isn't money at all. He thought I worried too much. I thought he avoided anything uncomfortable by making jokes until the moment passed. But there was nothing so dramatic that I thought we were on the brink of collapse. If anything, I thought we were in a phase. That's what people call it when something feels off but not alarming enough to force a real confrontation. A phase. He was more glued to his phone. A phase. He'd started caring more about what he wore on work trips. A phase. He was suddenly working out at 6 in the morning after years of insisting treadmills were torture. Devices. A phase. He took longer to answer texts when he traveled. A phase. He got weirdly protective of his phone screen angle around me. A phase. There is a very embarrassing kind of intelligence you have when you're being lied to by someone you love. You notice everything. And then you bend yourself into a pretzel to make each thing harmless because the alternative is too expensive emotionally. Our 12th anniversary was coming up in about 3 weeks when this happened. We'd already talked about keeping it low-key because Molly had summer swim lessons. I had just paid for new tires on my SUV, and Derek kept saying work was insane. We were going to do dinner somewhere nice in Columbus and maybe a night at a downtown hotel if my sister Brooke could take Molly. That was the plan as far as I knew. On a Monday morning in June, Derek told me he had to leave the next day for what he called a vendor strategy summit in Chicago. 2 nights. He said it with the same tone people use when they announce they have to pick up dry cleaning, like it was annoying but ordinary. I was standing at the kitchen island cutting strawberries for Molly's lunch when he came in wearing gym shorts and his quarter zip, toweling off from his workout. He kissed my cheek and said, "Need to head to Chicago tomorrow. Grant wants all regional leads there for mid-year planning." Grant was his boss, mid-50s, golf tan. Somehow always looked like he just stepped off a dealership commercial. I said, "You literally just got back from Louisville." "I know. For how long?" "Back Thursday night if everything wraps on time." Molly, who had an endless ability to pick the worst possible timing for every question, said, "Can I get one of those giant cookies from Costco after swim tonight?" I said, "Not the time." Derek laughed, grabbed a strawberry off the cutting board, and said, "Maybe if you stop negotiating like a union representative." Nothing about that morning felt like it belonged in a before and after story. That's the creepy part. Betrayal doesn't always show up with thunder in the background. Sometimes it happens while somebody steals fruit off a lunch container. He packed Tuesday morning. Nice jeans, a button down, his navy blazer. Sneakers clean enough to make me notice because Derek is not naturally a clean sneaker man. I asked if Chicago had a dinner planned and he said probably. Why? I said, "You look fancier than Vendor Summit." He smirked and said, "What if I'm finally evolving?" I remember rolling my eyes. I remember telling him not to forget the ibuprofen he always needed after hotel pillows wrecked his neck. I remember him standing in the doorway with his roller bag saying, "Text me if Molly needs anything for camp forms." My email's been weird on the phone. I remember kissing him goodbye and thinking absolutely nothing important about it. He texted when he got to the airport. He texted when he landed. He texted a picture of a sad conference room pastry tray around noon with the caption, "You know things are bleak when the croissants are this dry." I hearted it and went back to processing open enrollment corrections. That night he called from what sounded like a loud bar and said he might be late getting back to the hotel because the team went out after meetings. Again, normal. The next day was Wednesday. And the call came a little after 4 in the afternoon while I was half listening to a training webinar and half folding laundry at my desk. It was a number with an Arizona area code. I almost ignored it because I assumed it was spam. But I'd been waiting on a call from a pharmacy benefits representative I didn't have saved, so I answered. A woman with a bright, polished voice said, "Hi, may I speak with Mrs. Mercer?" "That's my married last name." I said, "This is she." "Wonderful, Mrs. Mercer. This is Alicia from the Sonoran Crest Resort in Scottsdale. I'm just checking in to make sure you and Mr. Mercer are enjoying your anniversary stay." I honestly thought she had the wrong person. I said, "I'm sorry, what?" She did that little customer service laugh people do when they think you're being playful. "Your anniversary package. I wanted to make sure everything in the suite looks good and see if you'd prefer the strawberries. Before or after your dinner reservation." I sat up so fast my chair hit the wall behind me. "There has to be some mistake," I said. "I'm in Ohio." There was a pause, paper ruffling on her end. "Is this Hannah Mercer?" "Yes." "And your husband is Derek Mercer?" My mouth went dry. "Yes." "Okay, I apologize if I've caught you at a bad time. I'm calling the contact number on the reservation. You checked in yesterday for the desert anniversary package, 2 nights, Casita Suite. Under Derek and Hannah Mercer." I just stared at my laptop screen like it might start explaining my life to me. Then I said, very slowly, "I have never been to your resort in my life." There was silence on the other end that felt longer than it probably was. Then the woman's voice changed. Less bubbly, more careful. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Mercer. Let me get my front office manager." The line clicked and I stood up without meaning to. My legs felt buzzy, like I'd had too much caffeine and not enough oxygen. Part of my brain was still trying to rationalize it. Maybe Derek had booked something as a surprise for us and accidentally used my number for confirmation, except she said we checked in yesterday. Maybe it was a scam. Maybe there was another Derek Mercer with a wife named Hannah and we were in some weird computer mix-up so specific it would have to be ordained by a demon. A man came on the line. He introduced himself as Eli and asked whether I could verify the last 4 digits of the card on file. He gave me the last 4 first. It was our joint visa. Not similar, not close, ours. He said he was sorry. But there appeared to be some confusion because the reservation profile listed Derek and Hannah Mercer, a marriage anniversary notation, my phone number, my email, and our home address. He said they had checked in the previous evening and the guest in the room had confirmed the profile details verbally. I asked him if Derek was there alone. He told me he couldn't disclose guest details without permission. That was all the answer I needed. I said, the woman in that room is not me. He was quiet for a second, then said, I understand. I asked whether anyone had used my ID. He said the reservation had been prepaid and the front desk had scanned a driver's license for the accompanying guest, but he would need to review it with security and billing. He asked if I wanted the card frozen for further incidental charges. That's when the whole thing moved from surreal to frighteningly practical. Because yes, I absolutely wanted the card frozen, and no, I had not authorized an anniversary stay in Scottsdale, Arizona, and yes, I wanted copies of whatever could legally be sent to the primary cardholder. He said they'd have to route it through accounting and management, but he would note the file and have someone call me back. I hung up and immediately checked our banking app. There it was, pending charge from Sonoran Crest Resort for $2,184.76. Then another pending restaurant pre-authorization for $186. Then spa services. Then something from a boutique inside the resort. My hands were shaking so badly I kept mistyping my password. I called Derek, straight to voicemail. I called again, same thing. I texted, call me now. Then, right now. Then, because my brain had started sprinting ahead of me, I opened his location and Find My. He had turned it off. Not unavailable because of bad service. Off. I don't know how to explain the feeling of knowing before you know. It's like your body takes the truth first and your brain lags behind. Trying to negotiate with facts. I already knew it was bad. I just didn't know how bad. My friend Tessa was the first person I called. She and I have known each other since freshman year of college. And she is the kind of person I call when I need emotional support and mild criminal energy. She answered with, hey, what's up? I said, either Derek is cheating on me at a resort in Arizona or I'm having a psychotic break. There was a pause. Then she said, start over and talk slower. So I did. The hotel call, the anniversary package, the frozen card, the Chicago lie. By the time I finished, Tessa was already in logistics mode. Okay, she said. First, screenshot every charge. Second, do not confront him until you have more than just the hotel call. Third, I'm coming over. I said, Molly gets home in 40 minutes. Then I'm coming now. While I waited for her, I did what I think a lot of women do in moments like this. I became a detective instead of a person. I stopped feeling things in a normal sequence and started opening tabs. I checked Derek's company calendar on the family iPad, which he'd once synced for convenience and then apparently forgotten about. No Chicago summit, no vendor strategy anything, just a blocked out entry that said, travel, with no details. I checked our email. There was no reservation confirmation because he'd used his work email, not the family account. I checked our phone records through the carrier app and found a number from Scottsdale he had called twice the week before. I googled it, the resort. Tessa walked in without knocking because that is our friendship level and found me sitting at the dining room table surrounded by paperwork like I was building a murder board. She listened, looked at the screenshots, and said, do you want the real question or the nice question? I said, real. How long have you known something was off? That got me, because now that the door was open, all the things I had quietly filed away as phases started drifting out of storage. Back in February, Derek started taking business calls outside. Not occasionally, consistently. He'd step onto the patio or into the garage and speak in that lower, flatter voice people use when they don't want to be overheard. In March, he bought new clothes without mentioning it. Not a huge shopping spree. But enough that I noticed because Derek historically thought shopping was a form of punishment. In April, he became weirdly invested in whitening toothpaste and gym attendance. In May, he missed my birthday dinner because his flight from St. Louis was delayed, but his boarding pass email said he had landed almost 2 hours before he told me he did. At the time, every individual thing seemed too stupid to turn into a full accusation. Now it all lined up in a way that made me want to peel my skin off. Tessa asked if I wanted to call his office. I did. We found the main number for his company and asked for Grant's assistant. Pretending I needed to confirm where to send a document Derek needed during the Chicago meetings. She said, "Oh, Derek's out on personal time until Thursday. Did he still need that reimbursement form?" Tessa mouthed, "Jesus Christ." So now I knew it wasn't work. It wasn't even half work. He had taken PTO. I called him again. Voicemail. Then I did something I almost never do. I called his mother, Janet. I did not tell her what I suspected. I just said, "Hey, is Derek with you by any chance? I haven't been able to get hold of him and he mentioned family stuff last week." Janet laughed, not in a cruel way, just confused. "No, honey, I thought you two were in Arizona." The room went so still it was like all the air got vacuumed out. "I'm sorry," I said. She said, "For your anniversary trip. Didn't he surprise you? He called Sunday and said he booked a nice place in Scottsdale because you two needed time away. Before Molly's summer schedule got crazy." I told him that was sweet. Tessa's face changed when she saw mine. I made some excuse, got off the phone, and just sat there. Because that part wrecked me more than I expected. Not the cheating exactly. The way he had built infrastructure around it. He had told his mother I was with him. He had told his job he was on personal time. He had told me he was in Chicago. He had layered lie on top of lie until there was almost no angle from which the truth could accidentally appear. Tessa said, "He has done this before." I said, "What?" She held my gaze. "Maybe not this exact person or this exact trip. But nobody becomes this organized on their first attempt." That sentence made me cold all over. Molly got home from her friend's house 5 minutes later, tossed her backpack on the mudroom bench, and launched into a story about somebody named Peyton cheating at a board game. I made her mac and cheese. I asked about swim practice. I signed a camp form. I helped her find the blue goggles instead of the pink ones. It was one of the hardest parts of the whole thing. Acting like the house wasn't currently split down the middle by a secret she didn't deserve to stand near. Derek finally texted at 6:12 p.m. "In dinner with vendors. Can I call later?" I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I sent back, "No. You can call now." He replied 3 minutes later, "What's wrong?" I wrote, "Ask the Sonoran Crest Resort." He didn't respond. Not for 6 minutes, then 10, then 15. Tessa and I just sat there on the couch while Molly watched a baking show in the den and our dog snored like a chainsaw. I have never heard silence so loud. Finally my phone rang. I answered and said nothing. Derek said, "Hannah?" That tone. Cautious. Assessing. I said, "Who is she?" He exhaled slowly, like I was being dramatic in a meeting. "You need to calm down." I actually laughed. "Don't do that," I said. "Do not talk to me like I'm the unstable person in this conversation. It isn't what you think." Again with that stupid line. The universal anthem of men caught being exactly what they are. "So you're not at a resort in Scottsdale under our names, on our card, celebrating our anniversary with another woman." He was quiet just long enough to confirm everything. Then he said, "I can explain." "Great," I said. "Start." He said her name was Sabrina. He said he met her in March through a healthcare procurement client event in Cincinnati. He said it started as flirting. He said he never planned for it to go this far. He said the Arizona trip was supposed to be a chance to figure things out. That phrase hit me like a slap. Figure things out. Yes. With her. With us. What does that even mean? I've been unhappy for a while. I looked at Tessa, who visibly recoiled hearing that through my phone speaker. I said, "So your solution was to take another woman on an anniversary trip in my name?" "It wasn't an anniversary trip with her, technically. I think I temporarily left my body." "You prepaid the desert anniversary package." He said nothing. "You told your mother I was with you." "Nothing. You used our card." "Hannah, I was going to move money back before the bill cycled." That was the first moment the conversation shifted from devastation to fury. Not because it was the worst thing, but because it was so unbelievably insulting. Like I was supposed to be reassured that he planned to reimburse our own household after funding His affair. I said, come home tonight. He said, I can't just leave this second. I said, if you are not in this house by morning, I will change every password, call a lawyer. And tell your mother exactly where you are enjoying your fake anniversary. He said, don't do that. I said, drive. Then I hung up. I didn't sleep much. Tessa stayed over. We put Molly to bed, then spent 3 hours on my laptop changing passwords, downloading bank statements, pulling copies of our tax returns, and taking screenshots of anything remotely relevant. I texted my sister Brooke and told her I might need her to take Molly the next day. Brooke responded with, do you need me to come beat his ass or just babysit? That was comforting in a primal way. Around 9 that night, the resort manager, Eli, called me back. He could not send me the room folio while the stay was active. But because I was the primary cardholder and had disputed authorization, he could confirm the room had been occupied by Derek Mercer and one additional guest. He also told me there were gift shop and spa charges pending and that the guest had requested late checkout the next morning. Late checkout. I cannot explain why that detail enraged me so much. Maybe because cheating feels one level of horrible and leisurely cheating feels even worse. Like he wasn't even in panic mode until I ruined his schedule. Eli also told me, very professionally, that the signature authorization on file for incidental charges did not appear to match the digital profile history normally associated with the reservation, so their accounting office would be flagging it. I asked him what that meant exactly. He said whoever checked in had signed H. Mercer on the tablet. I had not signed anything. That turned out to matter later. The next morning, Brooke came and took Molly for what we told her was an impromptu cousin sleepover. Molly thought it was great. She packed 3 outfits and her stuffed seal and didn't ask nearly enough questions, which somehow made it worse. Derek got home a little after noon. I watched him pull into the driveway through the front window and had this bizarre out-of-body thought that he looked exactly like himself. Same sunglasses, same overnight bag, same tired slouch. It felt offensive that someone could look so ordinary while carrying something this ugly. He came in through the garage door, saw Tessa sitting at the kitchen table with me, and stopped. That's how this is going to be. Tessa said, you're lucky it's just me. He looked terrible, not guilt-ridden terrible, more like badly slept and badly shaved. There was a faint pink mark on his neck that I hated instantly. I said, sit down. He sat. I wish I could tell you he came in honest and shattered and ready to tell the truth, but he didn't. He came in trying to manage optics. That was the real beginning of the end for me. Not the resort. Not even Sabrina. It was the attempt to control the story after getting caught. He said he'd been feeling disconnected from me for over a year. He said he tried to ignore it. He said Sabrina made him feel seen. He said he never intended to hurt me like this. He said he knew how bad it looked. He said it became emotionally complicated. I said, stop speaking like a podcast therapist and answer actual questions. So I asked them, how long? Since late March, allegedly. How many times had they slept together? He said 6. I did not believe him. How many trips? More than 1. Less than 5, according to him. Which was the kind of answer liars give when they want credit for not making you drag every digit out of them. Did she know he was married? Yes, but he told her we were basically separated and staying in the house for Molly. Did anyone at work know? He said no. I also did not believe that. Had he spent money on her before this trip? A little. What does a little mean? Dinners, a concert, some hotel rooms. With what money? His discretionary spending, which in our marriage meant our money. Why did the resort think I was there? Because the booking profile auto-filled my name from the cardholder account and he didn't change it before check-in. That was a lie, I later found out. Because he had specifically selected the anniversary package and confirmed the guest profile details. He had to, but in the moment I didn't know that yet. Then I asked the question that turned everything. Why did you tell your mother I was with you? He stared at the table. Derek, he said, very quietly, because I didn't want anyone asking where you were. I said, where I was. He nodded, meaning if somebody called the hotel or tagged something or saw a receipt. Your explanation would be that I was the one there. He kept staring at the table. Tessa muttered, oh, that's sick. And it was, because until then, I'd been seeing the affair mostly as deceit and selfishness. That answer made me realize he had been willing to use my identity as cover if anything slipped. He had not just lied to me. He had positioned me inside the lie. I asked if Sabrina believed I was still in the picture. He said he told her the marriage was basically done. I asked if she thought he was getting divorced. He said, eventually, as if that word was a life raft. I asked if he loved her. He said, I care about her. I said, you should go care about her somewhere else. He looked at me like he genuinely had not prepared for the possibility that this might cost him his home immediately. That's the thing with cheaters like him. They script other people's reactions based on the least inconvenient version of reality. They always seem shocked when the person they betrayed doesn't stick to the script. He tried the tears. He really did. Eyes red, voice cracking, talking about Molly, talking about our years together. Talking about making a mistake. I said, a mistake is forgetting milk. This is a project. He slept in the guest room that night because I didn't want Molly blindsided by a vanished father. Without me deciding how to frame it. That sounds cold, but if you have kids, you know there's no room for impulsive theatrics. You can be heartbroken later. First you have to stabilize the floor under them. That afternoon I called a divorce attorney named Naomi that Brooke's friend had used last year. I expected to leave a voicemail. Instead, she had a cancellation and saw me the next morning. Naomi was one of those women who make you feel calmer just by existing in a blazer. She listened to the whole story without interrupting, took notes, and then said, first, I'm sorry. Second, stop talking to him unless it's logistical or about your child. Third, gather everything. She wanted account statements, mortgage information, retirement balances, car titles, tax returns, screenshots of the hotel charges, and copies of any written admission. She also told me something I did not know. In Ohio, adultery is not exactly a magical divorce cheat code the way people think it is. But dissipation of marital assets absolutely matters. If he spent joint funds on an affair, that could become relevant in financial negotiations. So could any forged authorizations or misuse of shared accounts. That's when I told her about the hotel signature and how the reservation used my identity. She got very still at that. Did he ever sign your name to anything else? I don't know. Find out. I drove home feeling like the whole world had tilted 1 degree off center. Over the next few days I found out more than I wanted. The first big thing came from the family iPad. Derek had deleted his text thread with Sabrina from his phone. But he forgot deleted messages sometimes linger in synced devices for a bit if settings are inconsistent. Tessa found them because she is a raccoon with Wi-Fi. I wish I had not read them. Truly. People always think the worst part of cheating is picturing the sex. But for me it was the casual intimacy. The running little jokes. The complaining about daily life. The way he narrated me to another woman as if I were some overbearing roommate. He called me predictable. He said I schedule affection. He told her our marriage had been dead for years. Which was news to the man who had kissed me in the kitchen 2 days before leaving for his fake work trip. There were also messages from him saying, Mom thinks Hannah's with me so we're clear, and the hotel stuff is under the card profile, don't worry. That message made my stomach drop because it proved exactly what I feared. My identity confusion had not been an innocent autofill accident. He knew. Sabrina's messages were almost worse because she sounded half invested, half impatient. Like she'd been listening to him promise change for a while. At one point she wrote, I'm not doing another secret holiday. He replied, this one's different, I needed time with you away from everything. Then a little red heart. I sent screenshots to Naomi. Then I checked our credit report. That was when things crossed from a fair mess into something much uglier. 3 months earlier, a new travel rewards card had been opened in both our names. Joint. $20,000 limit. I had no idea it existed. I confronted Derek that evening in the kitchen while Molly was upstairs FaceTiming Brooke's kids. What is the Horizon travel card? His face changed instantly. Not full panic, but enough. It's just a points card. You opened a joint card without telling me. I was going to use it for work travel and pay it off. In both our names. It got a better rate that way. With my credit. He rubbed his forehead. Hannah, I didn't think it would matter. It had a balance of almost $11,000. You could actually see the moment I became a different version of myself. Not stronger, not wiser, just done. There is a point where betrayal becomes so administratively stupid that grief has to stand aside. And let rage take the wheel. I said, you forged me onto a line of credit to take your girlfriend on trips. I didn't forge anything. I did the online application. In both our names. We're married. Naomi later explained that being married is not, in fact, a legal coupon for impersonation. I froze the card that night. The next day Sabrina messaged me. Not apologizing, not exactly. More like trying to get ahead of something. She wrote, I know you probably hate me. I didn't know the full truth. Derek told me you were separated and only living together because of your daughter and finances. I stared at the message for a while. Then I replied, he used our anniversary as the theme for your resort stay. She didn't answer for 10 minutes. Then, what? Then, he told me the package was just what was available on points. Which was a laughable lie if you had ever booked anything online in your life. I should have ignored her. I know that. But I was so full of broken glass by that point that I wanted every possible piece of information. No matter where it came from. So I called her. She sounded younger than I expected. Not 21 younger, maybe 32, 33. Composed in that trying not to cry voice that made me hate her slightly less than I wanted to. She said they met at an industry event in Cincinnati in March. He told her by the second week that his marriage was emotionally over. He said he was staying in the house because Molly was sensitive, and I was very dependent on the routine. He told Sabrina that we had separate bedrooms, which was absurd because our room had one bed and one husband in it until I moved him out. She also told me something Derek had left out. The Arizona trip was not their first overnight trip. It was their third. He had taken her to a hotel in Louisville in April and a lake resort in western Michigan in May. Both times, according to her, he said he was on work travel. By that point I was too tired to even react properly. Then she said, for what it's worth, I ended it when you texted him about the resort. I said, good for you. She was quiet. Then she said, he told me you hadn't touched him in over a year. I laughed so hard it startled even me. Of course he did, and maybe that was mean. But honestly there is something darkly hilarious about hearing the fictional version of your marriage that your spouse has been workshopping for other women. Like finding out someone has been using your life as source material for bad screenwriting. After I got off the phone with Sabrina, I sat in my parked car outside Kroger for almost 20 minutes because I had gone there for paper towels and somehow ended up calling my husband's mistress instead. That became my life for a while. Surreal errands interrupted by legal strategy. Janet, my mother-in-law, found out the truth 2 days later because Derek apparently decided to tell his parents a cleaned-up version before I got there first. He told them he had become emotionally involved with someone because our marriage had been struggling and he was confused. He skipped the fake anniversary, the shared card, the forged account, and the fact that he used me as a ghost companion on the reservation. Janet called me crying. She said, I know you're angry, but marriages can survive worse if both people want to work. That sentence nearly blew the top of my head off. I said, he told a resort I was in his bed while he was sleeping with someone else in Arizona. Silence. Then, much smaller, he didn't mention that. No, I'm sure he didn't. To her credit, Janet did not defend that. She just cried harder. My father-in-law Ray called the next day and said, I'm not going to pretend he didn't bring this on himself. Which, coming from a 68-year-old retired contractor who thinks feelings should be handled with deck repair, was basically poetry. Molly was the hardest part by far. We told her the weekend after he got back. Naomi advised against a dramatic full reveal, obviously, so we kept it age-appropriate. Derek and I sat with her in the living room. She had just come back from a pool party and still smelled like sunscreen and chlorine. I said, Dad and I are having grown-up problems. And he's going to be staying somewhere else for a while. Molly looked at him first. Then me. Then our dog, as if maybe he'd translate. Like a hotel. Derek said, an apartment, probably. She asked if it was because they argued sometimes. We said yes, in a way. She asked if it was because of her. We said absolutely not. She asked if he was still coming to swim meets. He said yes. Then she said, are you getting divorced? No 10-year-old should be that fluent in the vocabulary of collapse, but kids are not stupid. They hear other kids talk. They watch movies. They know what tension tastes like in a house. I told her we were working through next steps. Derek started crying. I am telling you, there is almost nothing more enraging than a cheating husband crying in front of the child whose world he just detonated. It puts emotional labor onto the exact people he should be protecting from it. Molly got quiet and leaned against me. Later that night she whispered, did Dad do something bad? I said, Dad made choices that hurt our family. She thought about that and said, is that why you look mad all the time now? That nearly broke me. Derek moved into a furnished apartment about 15 minutes away the next week. Not because he wanted to be noble, Because Naomi told me not to keep sharing a roof if I could help it, and because I told him if he tried to act like guest room limbo was a long-term plan, I would tell his HR department exactly what their regional sales lead had been doing with his so-called travel schedule. That last part turned out not to be empty. Here's where it gets even messier. When I was going through our statements, I noticed some of the travel charges lined up suspiciously close to dates when Derek had told me the company was reimbursing him. That bothered me, so I asked him directly whether he had expensed any of these trips through work. He said no. A lie. I found the proof because he had saved PDF copies of expense reports to a shared cloud folder he thought I never looked at. One of the Louisville hotel charges had been submitted as client lodging due to weather delay. A dinner with Sabrina had been coded as provider entertainment. There was also mileage reimbursement for a Michigan trip he absolutely did not take alone. At that point, I asked Naomi whether telling his employer would hurt me more than help me. She said not to do anything vindictive just for satisfaction. But if there was fraud affecting marital finances or potential liability attached to shared accounts, I was within reason to protect myself factually. So I did not call and scream. I sent a very precise email to HR and copied the compliance address. I included screenshots, dates, the relevant charges, and a statement that I was not asking for gossip, only documenting that several disputed expenses tied to a joint account appeared inconsistent with personal travel he had admitted to. 2 days later, Derek called me sounding like he'd been hit by a truck. "What did you do?" I said, documented the truth. He said Grant pulled him into a meeting with HR and finance. He said they were reviewing expense irregularities. He said I was ruining his career. And that is when I said one of the few things I am still proud of from that whole period. "No, Derek, you took your girlfriend on fake business trips with fraudulent expense reports and forged a joint credit card in your wife's name. Your career tripped over your character." He got put on administrative leave that Friday. I don't know every detail of what happened internally after that because I genuinely stopped caring. But by the next week he was no longer employed there. Whether he resigned or was fired was one of those technical distinctions people use to preserve ego. Either way, he was out. Janet called again after that, and this time she was angry. Not at me for once. At him. She said, "I asked him point blank if he had used work money on this woman and he told me no. I am too old to be embarrassed by my own son like this." That made two of us. The weird thing about betrayal is how quickly the social map of your life changes. People pick sides quietly, through tone and timing, and whether they ask how you're doing or ask whether you've considered forgiveness. Some of our mutual friends disappeared because they were closer to Derek through work and golf, and didn't want to be in the middle. Some showed up with more loyalty than I expected. Tessa basically moved into my kitchen on bad nights. Brooke started sending me listings for ridiculously fun solo trips I wasn't emotionally ready for, but appreciated anyway. My dad, who is not a high-emotion man, came over one Saturday and silently installed new locks because he said, "No reason to keep old codes once trust is gone." That sentence landed hard. I changed the garage code. I changed streaming passwords. I changed emergency contacts on school forms. Do you know how depressing it is to update a dentist form because your marriage exploded? There is no romance in the aftermath. It's all portals and signatures and deciding who keeps the Sam's Club membership. Derek, meanwhile, entered what I privately call his remorse theater phase. He texted long apologies. He asked if we could do counseling, not to save the marriage necessarily, but to heal communication. He asked if we could still have family dinner once a week for Molly. He asked if I would reconsider telling so many people because it was humiliating for him. For him, he said that. I told him I would communicate through the co-parenting app Naomi recommended and otherwise by email if necessary. He hated that because apps don't let liars perform intimacy. Everything is time-stamped and boring. There's no room for, "Hey, can we talk as friends?" when the platform is built around dentist appointments and pickup times. One Sunday evening, a month after he moved out, Molly came back from his apartment and went straight to her room. That wasn't like her. Usually she came home with some full report about frozen yogurt or a craft project or what movie they watched. That day she was quiet. I found her sitting on the rug organizing colored pencils by shade. I asked if she was okay. She said, "Dad keeps asking if I'm mad at him." That felt like being kicked. I sat down beside her and said, "What do you say?" She shrugged. "I don't know. I just say I'm tired. Kids should not have to manage the emotional rehabilitation of the parent who hurt them. I told Derek later, through the app, that he needed to stop fishing for reassurance from a 10-year-old. He replied that he was just trying to reconnect. I said, then act like her parent, not the injured party. The legal process dragged on, as legal processes do. Derek wanted mediation first because it was cheaper. Which was funny given his recent spending history. Naomi said mediation was fine if he stayed honest. He did not. At mediation he acted stunned that I wanted dissipation of assets considered. He said the resort and trips were small compared to the whole estate. I think Naomi almost smiled when she heard that. Because if there is one thing a family attorney enjoys, it's a man minimizing documented financial misconduct in a room where everything is being written down. He also tried to frame the joint travel card as a misunderstanding between spouses. Naomi responded by asking whether I had ever received the card agreement, activation notice, or account credentials. I had not. Then she asked if he had authorized himself to electronically sign my name. He said, I handled the application for us. She wrote something down and he visibly regretted being alive. We eventually reached a settlement that was not perfect but was fair enough that Naomi told me taking it was smarter than paying to fight for an extra sliver out of spite. I kept the house until Molly is older. Partly because uprooting her immediately felt cruel and partly because Derek no longer had the stable income to buy me out cleanly anyway. Retirement accounts got divided, debts got assigned, the travel card balance became his problem. That part alone felt like a tiny him. A few more humiliating details came out during disclosures. He had bought Sabrina a gold bracelet in April. Same week he forgot to make a reservation for my birthday and brought home grocery store tulips. Like that was somehow charming. He had paid for a weekend spa package in Michigan using reward points generated from our household spending. He had also saved Sabrina in his phone under a fake vendor name. Which would have been clever if he hadn't chosen Summit Labs, a company that doesn't even exist. Apparently he is the criminal mastermind of a soap opera written by interns. I learned too much, honestly. Too much about where they ate, where they stayed, which brewery he said had the best patio, what songs they listened to on road trips, the exact brand of sunscreen he packed because she liked the smell. That's the part nobody prepares you for. You don't just lose the person. You get invaded by details you never asked for and can't entirely scrub out. For a long time the title of this whole thing in my head was still the resort call. That was the doorway, the clean dividing line. Before the phone rang, I was in one marriage. After it rang, I was in another reality entirely. A few months after separation, I got one last weird twist. Sabrina called me again. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity is a disease. She said she thought I should know Derek had contacted her after telling me he wanted to reconcile. Not because she wanted him back. She sounded more disgusted than anything. She said he had written this big message about how everything had imploded too fast, and how he was trying to stabilize things for Molly before making long-term decisions. Long-term decisions, as if he were choosing patio furniture. She sent me screenshots without me even asking. In the messages he said he missed who they were together, and that maybe in time they could circle back when life cooled down. That was the final click for me. Because even after all of it, he was still leaving doors cracked everywhere. Still managing parallel narratives. Still trying to keep emotional inventory in multiple warehouses in case he needed stock later. There was no great heartbreak after that. No fresh devastation. Just disgust, purified, useful disgust. The kind that burns off whatever tenderness your memory might have been tempted to preserve. When the divorce was finally finalized, I expected to feel dramatic relief. What I actually felt was tired. Deeply, gloriously tired. Naomi shook my hand outside the courthouse and said, "Go do something nice for yourself that has nothing to do with paperwork." So I did. I took Molly for burgers and fries and let her order a ridiculous milkshake with half a brownie stuck on top. We didn't make a big speech out of it. She showed me a video on her phone of somebody's dachshund in a raincoat. I laughed harder than the clip deserved. Life kept doing its weird little insistence on continuing. Derek asked if we could talk privately after the hearing. I said fine, 5 minutes. We stood near the parking lot in the kind of ugly winter sunlight Ohio specializes in. And he looked at me with this expression like he wanted credit for appearing ashamed. He said, "I know I've handled everything badly." I said nothing. Then he said, I never meant for it to happen like this. There it was, the last refuge of every person who actively built a disaster and still wants distance from authorship, as if events had simply arranged themselves around his bad luck. I looked at him and said, "You booked an anniversary resort with another woman, in my name, on my card, while telling your mother I was there and telling me you were at work. It happened exactly like you made it happen." He flinched like I slapped him. Good. He asked if I thought someday we could be friends for Molly's sake. And maybe some saintlier version of me would have said something measured and future-focused. But I was not interested in sainthood. I was interested in being honest. So I said, "I think someday we can be civil parents. Friendship is for people who didn't make me question my own reality." Then I got in my car and left. These days life is quieter. Not magically better in every way. Divorce is expensive. Co-parenting is annoying. Molly still has hard days. Especially around holidays or school events where the shape of the family is impossible to ignore. I still sometimes get slammed by random memories. Like the sight of a navy blazer or the word Scottsdale or a hotel commercial promising romantic packages, but the chaos is gone. The constant low-grade lie is gone. The feeling that something was wrong and I was somehow failing to name it is gone. I repainted our bedroom dark green because Derek always said dark walls made a room feel smaller. Turns out I like smaller if it means warmer. I got rid of the beige throw pillows he hated and bought ugly bright ones just because I could. I started taking Molly for breakfast on Saturday mornings when she's with me, just the two of us. No rushing. Sometimes we still end up talking about ordinary kid stuff. Sometimes she asks blunt, hard questions like whether adults can stop loving each other suddenly. I answer as honestly as she can handle. A while back she asked, if the hotel didn't call, would you still be with Dad? That one sat between us for a second. Then I said, probably for a while longer. She nodded in this thoughtful way and said, that lady saved you by accident. And honestly, that's about as close to a neat conclusion as any of this gets. Some cheerful resort employee in Arizona followed customer service protocol and accidentally blew the roof off my marriage. I still think about that call. About Alicia's bright voice asking if I was enjoying my anniversary stay. About how normal her question sounded. About how, for a few seconds, my life split into the version where I was still unsuspecting and the version where I could never go back. There are days I'm grateful the truth came in such a stupid, undeniable package. No gut feeling to debate. No months of being called paranoid. No half-proof. Just a luxury resort, chocolate-covered strawberries. And a husband too arrogant to realize that if you check into an anniversary suite in your wife's name, eventually somebody might call the wife. Story number 3. I was told my wedding invitation got lost in the mail, then my cousin accidentally live-streamed the ceremony. I'm 32, I live in Chicago, and my cousin Aaron is 31. We grew up in the kind of family where cousins were treated more like siblings because all the adults stayed within 40 minutes of each other and nobody respected the idea of a quiet weekend. We did Sunday dinners at my Grandma Joe's in Naperville. 4th of July at my Uncle Mark's place in St. Charles, Christmas Eve rotating between whichever aunt had recently redone her kitchen and wanted compliments. Aaron and I were 18 months apart, both only daughters. Both the older girl cousin category. Which meant we got paired together for everything whether we liked it or not. For a long time we actually did like it. We shared a room on family trips to Door County. We were the girls sneaking Bon Bell lip gloss into Grandma Joe's upstairs bathroom and using her curling iron when we were definitely told not to. In middle school we passed a journal back and forth with our crushes written in codenames. In high school we were the cousins taking photos in Uggs and North Face fleeces in somebody's front yard every Thanksgiving because our moms thought it was so cute that the girls are still close. We went to different colleges but still stayed in touch. Not every day, not in a best friend's way. But enough that if one of us had a breakup or job drama or some weird family thing, the other one got the call. When Aaron moved to Lincoln Park after college, we even had a little stretch where we were grabbing drinks every couple of weeks and doing all the very Chicago late 20s stuff. Friday happy hour, brunch places with impossible wait times. Walking around Target buying throw pillows and candles like that counted as a personality. She could be a lot. That's probably the nicest accurate way to put it. Aaron was always the kind of person who needed a thing to orbit around. In high school it was cheer. In college it was her sorority. After that it was her relationship, then Pilates, then clean beauty, then apartment design. Then, hosting. She didn't do casual. If she liked something, it became the center of her identity for 6 months. Her mom, my Aunt Lisa, was exactly the same way. If Aunt Lisa got into making charcuterie boards, suddenly every family function had 5 cheeses with little handwritten labels. If she decided she was a champagne-only person now, she'd start making faces at anyone who brought White Claw to a barbecue. So when Erin got engaged, it became the family's solar system. Her fiancé Cole proposed on a weekend in Charleston with one of those arranged photo moments where the photographer just happened to be nearby. I know this because Erin told me the whole story in a 23-minute voice note while I was on the Brown Line heading home from work. Cole had coordinated with her best friend Amanda. There were white roses, she had a fresh spray tan. Her nails were already done, the ring was classic but elevated, and there was dinner afterward at some oyster place where they gave them champagne in a corner table. It was all very Erin, and honestly I was happy for her. I work in events for a boutique hotel group downtown. So within about 48 hours of the engagement, I became useful. At first it was normal stuff. Do you think this venue quote is insane or am I out of touch? Can you look at this contract language and tell me if they're sneaking in extra fees? Do you know anyone good for florals who isn't obnoxious? That kind of thing. I didn't mind. It was easy for me and it made me feel included. Then it became a lot more. She wanted me to compare 3 different venues and make a spreadsheet with catering minimums, guest count limits, shuttle options, and rain plans. She asked if I could sit in on a call with the planner because you ask the practical questions I forget. She sent me invitation proofs at 11:40 p.m. and asked which font looked more expensive. She had me review room block numbers for out-of-town guests because I handle that kind of thing at work. At one point she actually texted, "Can you make me one of your weird little timeline docs because they calm me down?" Which, okay, rude phrasing, but I still did it. And I want to be clear, I was not a bridesmaid. That part didn't bother me at first. Erin told me over coffee that she was keeping the bridal party super small and intentional, which was corporate HR language for, I picked my college roommates and my sister-in-law. Fine. Whatever. I'm 32, I wasn't dying to stand in a satin dress and hold eucalyptus in the middle of July. She said, "You know you're basically more important than a bridesmaid though because you actually get weddings." That should have been my first warning because anytime someone tells you you're too special for the official role, they're about to ask you to do labor for free. The wedding was set for early September at this fancy resort in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. Chapel ceremony, lawn cocktail hour, ballroom reception. Very Midwest trying to feel East Coast country club. There was going to be a live painter, a string trio, signature cocktails named after their dog and her childhood cat, and welcome bags for guests with local popcorn and mini Advil packets for hangover recovery. She had a whole visual deck for the weekend. Of course she did. Save the dates went out in January. I know this because Erin texted me a photo of them before they mailed and asked if the envelope color looked too beige. I said it looked expensive, which was the correct answer. Then 2 weeks later, at Sunday dinner at my grandma's, my cousin Jenna said, "Did everyone get Erin's save the date because mine is on my fridge and my kids keep trying to color on it?" Everybody started talking about theirs. My Aunt Melissa said hers arrived bent because of the cold. Uncle Mark joked that he needed a save the date for the save the date because Lisa had already called him twice about the hotel block. My grandma said she put hers in the china cabinet because it looked too nice for the fridge. I said, I didn't get mine yet. No one reacted in a big way. Erin, who was spooning baked ziti onto her plate, looked up and said, "Really? That's annoying. It probably got lost. I'll send you a picture." And that was that. Not a huge deal. Mail gets weird, especially in January in Chicago when everything is slush and salt and half the city acts like envelopes personally offended them. Then the months kept going. I kept helping. I went to one dress appointment in Oak Brook because Amanda had to work and Erin wanted another opinion. I sat in a beige chair for 2 hours while she came out in 6 nearly identical strapless dresses and asked if the neckline on one was too bridal, which I still do not understand as a sentence. I helped her narrow down invitations. I gave her a reality check on guest count because she kept pretending 220 people was intimate. I listened to a full meltdown about whether black tuxes were too expected for a lake Wedding. Still no formal invitation. By late spring I started noticing little things that felt off. There was apparently a wedding group chat I wasn't in because Jenna mentioned a bridesmaid dress emergency and then got weird when I asked what she was talking about. Erin asked me if I knew any good bakery options for late night snacks and I said, "Did you decide on food trucks?" And she paused and said, "Oh, right, I forgot you haven't seen the revised plan." At my cousin Ryan's birthday, Aunt Lisa was talking to my mom about the shuttle schedule and hotel check-in gifts right in front of me. My mom gave me this quick side glance like she expected me to already know all of it. I started to feel stupid. Not excluded exactly, not yet. But like I was standing half an inch outside a conversation I was supposedly part of. In June I texted Erin, "Hey, I still never got the invite by the way. Just want to make sure I'm not missing RSVP stuff." She responded, "Oh my god, our mail is cursed. You're obviously invited. I'll have mom resend one." That, obviously, calmed me down. Honestly, it made me feel a little dramatic for even asking. A week later she called me from Sephora because she was in a scent crisis about wedding perfume. And somehow during that same call got me to help her reorganize the seating chart because two of Cole's cousins got divorced and now hated each other. This is what I mean when I say I stayed useful. Every time I started to think, this is strange, she'd loop me back in with some wedding detail and I'd think, okay, no, if she were excluding me, why would I still be this involved? Then in July, the real shift happened. Erin wanted me to come up to Lake Geneva on the Thursday before the wedding to just oversee some setup stuff. I asked what that meant and she said, "Honestly, not much. I just trust you more than the planner with the little details." The little details turned out to be assembling 200 welcome bags, checking the escort card table layout, verifying the bathroom baskets, making sure the string trio had the right timing for the processional, and basically functioning as unpaid day of support. I told her I couldn't take Thursday and Friday off that week. For context, September is a nightmare month in my job. Corporate season ramps up hard after summer. And my team was already short one manager because she'd gone on maternity leave early. I had a board retreat checking in that Friday, plus a huge pharmaceutical dinner the next Monday. I could maybe have gone up Friday night if I really needed to. But leaving Thursday to do free labor for a wedding I technically still hadn't even been formally invited to felt insane, so I tried to be nice about it. I said, "I can help you prep remotely and I can look over everything beforehand. But I can't physically be there Thursday. I really don't think you need me for the stuff you listed." That's literally what the planner is for. There was a long pause. Then she said, "Okay. I just thought family would want to show up for me, but okay." That annoyed me enough that I stopped cushioning my tone. I said, "I have been showing up for you for months." She went quiet in that cold way she has when she wants you to feel that you've misbehaved. Then she said, "I know. Never mind, I'll figure it out." After that, everything got weird fast. She stopped sending random wedding updates. When I texted her a week later asking if she had decided on the blue napkins or the green ones, she just reacted with a heart. At a family barbecue in August, Aunt Lisa was overly sweet to my face in a way that instantly raises my blood pressure. You know that brittle version of nice where every sentence sounds like it's covering something. "Megan, honey, how's work? You look tired, are you doing okay? We know you're just so busy these days." It was like they were building a case file that I was overwhelmed and unavailable. Around the same time, I saw my mom had a printed invitation on her kitchen counter when I stopped by after work. Cream envelope, calligraphy, wax seal, the whole thing. I stared at it for a second and she said, "Isn't it pretty?" I said, "Mine still never came." She looked surprised, but not alarmed enough for my liking. "Really? That's odd." I remember standing there in her kitchen with my purse still on my shoulder, looking at that invitation like it had personally insulted me. I said, "Mom, the wedding is in 3 weeks." She did that thing moms do when they know something is strange but don't want to touch it because touching it means conflict. "Well, maybe call Erin and ask if she wants you to just meet us there. It's probably a male thing." That night I sent the most direct text I had sent yet. I still have it because I screenshotted everything later. I wrote, "I need a clear answer because the wedding is close and I need to plan. Am I invited to the wedding and reception, yes or no? If my invite got lost, can you just text me the details and RSVP link?" She left me on read for 4 hours. Then she responded, "Of course you're invited, don't make it weird, We've just had so much going on. No RSVP link. No details. No replacement invite. Nothing. At that point I started feeling less confused and more humiliated. Because if someone actually wants you there, they make it easy for you to come. They don't act like getting basic logistics is a character flaw. They don't answer a yes or no question with, "Don't make it weird." I called Jenna, who is the cousin in our family everyone trusts because she's normal. She's 35, married, 2 kids, lives in Aurora, not dramatic, not passive-aggressive. Doesn't enjoy family politics the way some people in my family weirdly do. I asked her, "Can I ask you something without you telling everyone I asked?" She immediately said, "That sentence means this is about Aaron." I told her what was going on. She was quiet for a second and then said, "That is really weird." I said, "Do you know if they're trying to keep it smaller than they originally planned?" She said, "Not that I know of. It's still pretty big." Why? When I explained the missing invitation situation, Jenna sounded genuinely uncomfortable. "Megan, I assumed you had the same details as everyone else. I thought maybe you were just not doing wedding stuff because of work." That was the first moment I realized other people might have been getting a completely different story about me. I asked, "Has Aaron said I'm not coming?" Jenna hesitated in exactly the way you hesitate when you know the answer is yes but you don't want to be the person who says it. She said you were slammed with work and probably couldn't make the full weekend. I just stared at my living room wall. My TV was on mute. There was half a sweet green salad on my coffee table and I remember because that stupid bowl looked so normal while my chest was doing this horrible hot tight thing. "I never said that," I told her. "I know," Jenna said quietly. "I'm just telling you what I heard." At this point, any normal person would probably call and force the issue. But if you come from a family like mine, you know how easily that gets turned around on you. Suddenly you're sensitive, confrontational, ruining the bride's experience. Making everything about yourself. I could already hear Aunt Lisa's voice in my head saying, "This is supposed to be a joyful time." So instead I tried one more time, very politely, with Lisa. I texted, "Hi Aunt Lisa. I still never received my invitation and I need to know the hotel and timing if I'm coming. Aaron said I'm invited but I don't have anything official. Can you forward the info?" She replied the next morning, "Hi sweetheart. We've had a lot of last-minute shuffle with numbers and rooms. I know Aaron has been overwhelmed. Let me circle back with her." That was it. Not, "Absolutely, here you go." Not, "Oh no, what a mix-up." Just that. The day before Labor Day weekend, which was the wedding weekend, I still had no invite. No hotel block info, no schedule, no seating assignment, no nothing. By then everybody on Instagram was posting their nails, spray tans, garment bags. Wedding weekend, captions, little boomerangs of champagne at the resort. I was sitting at my desk in our hotel office in River North, answering emails about banquet linens. And trying not to cry over the fact that my own cousin had somehow made me feel like a clingy acquaintance asking to be included. I finally told my mom, "I don't think they want me there." She got defensive immediately, not at me, but in that guilty way people do when they don't want to admit they've watched something happen. "Megan, don't be dramatic. If Aaron said you're invited, you're invited." I said, "Then why'd I have literally no information?" She didn't really have an answer. She just kept saying maybe things were hectic, maybe the mail messed up. Maybe I should just drive up Saturday if I wanted. Which, no. I was not going to show up to a wedding venue where I had no seat, no place card, no hotel room, and no actual confirmation. I work events. I know exactly what "just show up" looks like from the inside. It looks like venue staff scrambling for an extra chair while everyone pretends not to notice. I told my mom I wasn't going to invite myself to a wedding. She sighed and said, "Do whatever you think is best." That sentence still makes me mad. Because what she meant was, I am not going to protect you from this. And I am also not going to openly participate in it. And you can just sit in the middle and figure out how much pain you want to absorb. So I stayed home. Saturday morning, the day of the wedding, I tried to act normal. I went to Pilates. I cleaned my apartment. I watered my plants and changed my sheets and did all the little tasks people do when they're trying not to think. Around 2, I picked up Thai food from my usual place on Clark and told myself maybe it was better this way. Maybe the whole thing had become so weird that missing it was cleaner. I put on a giant Northwestern sweatshirt from college and sat on my couch with green curry and a reality show I wasn't paying attention to. At 3:47 p.m., Instagram sent me a notification that said, Tessa Martin is live. Tessa is my youngest cousin. She's 22, a senior at Indiana University. One of those girls who is always tan no matter the month and somehow knows how to make a messy bun. Look expensive. She posts everything. Coffee, car rides, outfit checks, half a face mask. If you handed Tessa a bagel, somewhere in the next 11 minutes there would be a video of the bagel. Normally I skip right past live videos because I don't care. But I think I clicked because the timing was weird. Or maybe because some part of me knew exactly what it was before it loaded. The screen opened to a sideways shaky view of white folding chairs on a lawn overlooking the lake. At first I genuinely thought it might be pre-ceremony setup or somebody showing the venue. Then the camera turned and I saw the floral arch. Cream roses, blue delphinium. Those same stupid green draping vines Erin had texted me about in July because she couldn't decide. If they looked too wild, I knew instantly where I was looking because I had helped her compare florist mood boards for that exact arch. I heard Tessa whisper, "Wait, can you guys hear me?" Then somebody hissed, "Tess, get off your phone." My stomach dropped so hard it felt physical. The camera bounced around again and landed briefly on the front rows. My Uncle Mark in a navy suit. Aunt Melissa in a dusty blue dress. Jenna with her husband. My Grandma Jo wearing the silver jacket she saves for weddings and funerals. All of them there. All of them seated. All of them apparently under the impression that this was normal. Then the stream caught Erin. She was at the top of the aisle with my uncle. Strapless dress, cathedral veil, bouquet of white roses and ranunculus. Face tilted in that practiced soft smile brides do when they know photographs are happening from every angle. The string trio started and I just sat frozen on my couch staring at my phone while my family watched her get married without me. I don't know how long I watched. Maybe 2 minutes, maybe 5. Long enough to know it was real. Long enough to hear Tessa whisper, "Oh my God, Amanda, you're blocking the view." Long enough to see that there were definitely no empty mystery seats waiting for me. At one point the camera swung toward the side aisle and I saw the welcome sign with both their names and the date in that expensive calligraphy Erin had made me vote on. There was a little easel with a basket of programs. For some reason that detail made it worse. The programs existed, the printed materials existed, the mailing system had apparently functioned beautifully for every decorative object except the one thing that would have told me I belonged there. I screen recorded the live. Not because I was planning anything yet, but because I suddenly knew, with absolute clarity, that the story told later would not match what had happened. Then my phone started buzzing. First it was Jenna calling. I answered and she said, without even saying hi, "Megan, I am so sorry." I just said, "So I wasn't crazy." She sounded like she wanted to climb through the phone and disappear. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know. I thought you chose not to come. I was still staring at the frozen live frame on my screen. I asked 3 times. "I know," she said. "I know now." Then she lowered her voice and said, "Tessa has no idea she's lived to everyone. She thought she was sending it to her roommate." Of course she did. That was the accidentally live streamed part. She wasn't doing some dramatic exposé. She was just being 22 and stupid with her phone. And in the process she detonated whatever fake story Erin and Aunt Lisa had built around my absence. I hung up with Jenna and just sat there. The live finally ended. My curry had gone cold. I could hear traffic outside on Clark and some guy laughing on the sidewalk below my building. And everything felt surreal in that awful way where the world is continuing at full speed while you're suddenly not in it. About 20 minutes later, I got a text from Erin. It said, "Hey, sorry if you saw Tessa's live. We figured it would be less drama this way." That was the whole text. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I know this is hurtful." Not even another fake mail excuse. Just, "We figured it would be less drama this way." I think that sentence changed something permanent in me. Because until then, some part of me was still looking for a misunderstanding. Even after the live. Even after months of weirdness. I thought maybe there had been some giant family miscommunication, maybe Aunt Lisa interfered. Maybe Erin felt awkward, maybe people were being cowardly but not cruel. That text was cruel. I called her immediately. She declined it. I called again. Declined. Then Aunt Lisa called me instead. She opened with, "What exactly are you trying to do right now?" No hello. No concern. Straight accusation. I said, "What am I trying to do?" "Lisa, I just watched Erin's wedding on Instagram after being told my invitation got lost in the mail for months. She let out this sharp breath like I was exhausting. We are in the middle of the reception entrance. This is not the time. I almost laughed because the nerve was so extreme it stopped feeling real. Actually, I think the time would have been any of the 3 times I directly asked whether I was invited. Her tone went instantly icy. Megan, Erin has been under immense stress. She did not need any added tension. From me asking for an address and start time? That's not what this is about. Then what is it about? She hesitated, which told me she hadn't expected me to keep pushing. Then she said, "You've been very difficult this whole process." That was such a bizarre thing to hear that I actually said, "I'm sorry, what?" You inserted yourself into planning, kept score of every little favor. And when Erin needed help the week of, you made it all about your boundaries in your job and what you could or couldn't do. I stood up off my couch because anger finally kicked harder than shock. Inserted myself? Erin asked me for help constantly. You always have to be the expert, she snapped. Everyone tiptoes around your opinions because you work in events and you make people feel stupid. That one landed because it was so clearly not about a lost invitation or guest count or logistics. It was about resentment, old, ugly resentment I apparently had not realized was there. I said, "So the solution was to lie to me for months and let me find out from Instagram." She said, and I will never forget this, frankly, yes. Because if we told you directly, you would have made a whole issue of it and this day is not about you. Then she hung up on me. I think I just stood in my living room for a full minute with the phone in my hand. Then I did what maybe I should have done weeks earlier. I opened the family group chat. Not the wedding one I wasn't in. The regular family one called Sunday Crew, where people send weather updates and photos of Costco finds and the occasional weird minion meme from Uncle Mark. I typed, for clarity, since I'm sure different stories are floating around. I did not decline Erin's wedding and I was not too busy to come. I asked multiple times if I was invited after my save the date and invitation got lost in the mail. I never received details, hotel info, or an RSVP link. I found out the ceremony was happening because Tessa accidentally went live on Instagram. Then I attached 4 screenshots. The text where I said I never got the invite. The text where Erin said I was obviously invited. The direct yes or no text. And Erin's, we figured it would be less drama this way. Then I put my phone down. Within maybe 15 seconds, it exploded. My mom called first. I didn't answer. Then Uncle Mark. Then Jenna. Then my Grandma Jo, which honestly devastated me more than anybody else because Grandma Jo never calls unless something is wrong or she's confused about how to forward an email. I answered hers. She sounded shaky. "Megan, honey, what is this?" I swallowed and said, "Exactly what it looks like." There was a long silence, and then she said, very quietly, "I thought you had to work." I sat back down on the couch. "No." "Oh," she said, "just that. One little broken syllable." Then she said, "Your aunt told us you weren't able to make the weekend and were keeping things simple because of work." I closed my eyes. There it was. The script. "I never said that, Grandma." "I know that now." In the background I could hear muffled voices and clinking silverware. Which meant she was probably off to the side at the reception, having this conversation while everyone else was eating salad under string lights. The image of that made me feel sick and weirdly calm at the same time. Like the lie had finally lost control of the room. Then came Jenna, who texted, "Reception is a disaster by the way." Followed by, "Amanda is crying. Tessa is hiding in the bathroom. Lisa is saying you ruined the night." I wrote back, "Interesting phrasing." Jenna sent, "For what it's worth, multiple people are asking why no one just told you the truth." About an hour later, Tessa texted me. "TBH, I am so sorry. I didn't know they actually didn't invite you. I would never have gone live if I knew. I thought you couldn't come because of work and were maybe coming late." I believed her. Tessa is messy, not malicious. I asked, "Did everybody think that?" She responded, "Most people I think. But Amanda and your Aunt Lisa definitely knew." That made sense. Amanda was Erin's best friend and maid of honor. So obviously she knew the actual guest list. Aunt Lisa had probably done the dirty work. Maybe a few others knew too. In families like this, truth exists in layers. Core people know. Outer people repeat whatever version keeps dinner smooth. I didn't sleep much that night. My phone kept lighting up with texts ranging from supportive to cowardly to outright infuriating. My mom sent, "I wish you had talked to me before posting in the group." I wrote back, "About what?" She didn't answer for 2 hours. Then, I mean before making it public. Public, to my family. The family that had apparently let me be quietly erased so that no one had to feel uncomfortable in formalware. Uncle Mark sent, this should have been handled differently on all sides. That one made me laugh out loud in my dark bedroom because of course that was his take. Not, what they did was cruel. Not, I'm sorry, just a bland HR statement as if we had all mishandled a conference room booking. Jenna, bless her, kept me updated in real time because by then she was mad too. Apparently after my screenshots hit the family chat, people started comparing notes at their tables. My grandma asked Lisa directly why she'd said I was working if I wasn't. My mom apparently got quiet and embarrassed because she realized how bad it looked that her own daughter had been fed to the wolves while she kept saying, maybe it's a male thing. Tessa admitted the live was accidental and started crying because Aunt Lisa yelled at her in front of other people. Cole looked stunned, which tells me maybe he genuinely didn't know how Aaron and Lisa handled it. Or maybe he knew enough to stay silent but hadn't expected evidence to arrive mid-reception. Then, around 11:30 p.m., Aaron finally sent me a real message. It was long, which in her case usually means carefully self-justifying. She wrote, I didn't want this to become a huge family thing, but since you clearly chose that route, I'll be honest, I felt used and judged by you throughout this entire process. Every time I asked for help, you acted like I was burdening you even though you always offered opinions. When I actually needed support, you made it very clear your work was more important, and I realized I didn't want that energy around me on my wedding weekend. Mom and I thought it would be kinder to let distance happen naturally instead of having a dramatic confrontation. I'm sorry your feelings are hurt, but posting private texts during my reception was incredibly vindictive. I read it 3 times. There it was, the real reason, or at least the version she could say out loud and still sleep with. Not because I had done anything monstrous. Not because of venue limits or some logistical emergency. Because I stopped being useful on command. Because I set one boundary. Because she experienced, I can't take Thursday off to assemble welcome bags, as betrayal severe enough to justify a months-long lie. I wrote back, you asked me for free professional help for months, told me I was invited. Let me plan around that, and then hid behind the mail because you didn't want to say you were angry. If you felt judged, you could have used words. You don't get to lie to me and then call me vindictive for not covering for you. She left me on read. The next morning, I got brunch with my friend Lauren, who has known me since college and has the exact temperament required for moments like this. Meaning she does not say, maybe they meant well, when people are being insane. She sat across from me at a place in Lakeview while I pushed eggs around my plate and went through the whole thing. The texts, the months of helping, the live stream, the group chat. Lauren just stared at me for a second and said, so they wanted your labor, not your presence. That was it, clean and ugly and true. Later that day, Jenna called me with more details she had heard after the reception started dissolving into whispers. Apparently there had been a conversation at the rehearsal dinner the night before, after I was already effectively cut out, where Aunt Lisa told a couple people. Megan has been so intense about the planning and then bailed when Aaron really needed her. So we're simplifying, as if I were a centerpiece they decided not to rent. Jenna also said Amanda let slip that Aaron had been complaining for weeks that I made everything feel transactional, because I would answer her questions and then remind her I couldn't take on more, which, yes, that's what happens when one adult keeps asking another adult for hours of unpaid skilled work. The word for that is boundaries, not transaction. Then came the piece that honestly made the whole thing click. Tessa told Jenna that a month before the wedding, Aaron had been furious because I refused to use my hotel connections to push a bigger room upgrade for her welcome party after the resort said no. She wanted me to work my magic with a vendor I had never even worked with at a property I did not control during peak wedding season. And I told her I couldn't ethically do that, and also it wasn't my job. She apparently took that as me not caring enough. So no, it was never the invitation getting lost. The invitation story was just the most convenient cover because it let them keep me quiet and hopeful at the same time. If they told me directly, I would have had a reaction. Maybe I would have told other people. Maybe I would have asked why. Maybe I would have forced them to say the ugly part out loud before Erin got her pretty weekend. By pretending the mail messed up, they got to postpone the truth until the ceremony was already happening and social pressure would ideally keep me from doing anything. And it might have worked. If Tessa hadn't accidentally live-streamed the ceremony. The fallout rolled on for weeks. My mom and I had one of the worst fights we've ever had. She kept framing herself as caught in the middle, and I finally said, "You were not in the middle. You were sitting in a chair at the wedding." She cried. I cried. It was miserable. Her defense, if you can call it that, was that she honestly believed I had been invited and that when things got vague, she thought maybe I'd decided not to go because it felt awkward. I asked why she never once called me and said, "Do you have your room booked? What time are you leaving? What are you wearing?" Any normal mother-daughter wedding conversation. She admitted she noticed it was odd, but she didn't want to stir things up with Aunt Lisa right before the wedding. Which, again, translates to, protecting peace mattered more than protecting me. My Grandma Jo apologized to me twice, which made me feel guilty because none of it was her fault. She's 78 and still somehow the only person in my family capable of saying a clean apology. She told me, "I should have asked more questions when they said you were working. It didn't sound like you." That one almost broke me because she knew, even if only in instinct. She knew the story didn't fit me. Aunt Lisa went full martyr. She started telling people she was heartbroken that a private misunderstanding was weaponized online. Which is funny because I did not post a thing online. I posted screenshots in a family text thread after being publicly erased. But in her world, anything that leaves her control becomes public. She also told my mom I tainted Aaron's memories forever. Which is such dramatic wedding brain nonsense that even my mom rolled her eyes at that one. Cole actually called me about 10 days later. That was the biggest surprise of all. We were never especially close, but he sounded genuinely uncomfortable and kind of wrecked. He said he wanted to apologize for his part because he knew by the final week that there had been a shift, and asked Aaron if I was still coming. She told him I was overwhelmed with work and had pulled back after making things weird. He said he didn't push because he figured it was family dynamics and because, in his words, once your future mother-in-law and your bride are both saying the same thing, it feels like stepping on a landmine. I appreciated the honesty even though it didn't absolve him. He still went through with it. He still watched me disappear and chose the easier version of events. But he also told me one thing that made me laugh in that numb, ugly way. Apparently, right before the ceremony, Aaron had a meltdown because one of the florals on the arch wasn't symmetrical enough for photos. And during that meltdown she said, "This is exactly why I didn't need Megan here telling me everything that's wrong." Which means I had been cast in her head as some hovering critical spirit even while I was 40 miles away on my couch eating Thai food. That's how these family stories work. Once someone decides you are the problem, your absence gets edited into proof too. A couple of my relatives tried to smooth things over in the most annoying ways possible. Uncle Mark invited me to let this cool off before the holidays. Aunt Melissa said, "Weddings make people crazy," like that was meant to erase months of lying. Ryan, who is 27 and emotionally allergic to conflict, texted me, "I love you both and hate this," which I'm sure felt meaningful to him but read like a throw pillow. Jenna remained the only one consistently normal. She told people flat out that what happened was wrong. She also told me something I hadn't known. Apparently at the reception, after my screenshots, Amanda had said to Aaron, "You could have at least not used her for all the planning advice first." Which means even her own best friend knew how bad it looked. That detail mattered to me more than it probably should have. Because once you've been gaslit for months, even small outside confirmation feels stabilizing. Like yes, this was as weird and mean as it felt. The most pathetic part is that about 6 weeks later, Aaron sent me a message pretending none of the emotional core of this existed. It was a picture of some candle favors from the wedding with the caption, "Do you want a couple? We have extra." I stared at it for a full minute. No apology, no accountability, just leftover candles. I responded, "No thanks." Then she wrote, "Okay. I do hope someday you can understand that I was trying to protect my peace." That phrase makes me want to bite through drywall now. I wrote back, "You weren't protecting your peace. You were avoiding honesty." She didn't answer. Thanksgiving that year was a mess. For the first time in my life, I skipped the main family gathering and went to Lauren's apartment instead, where she made a ridiculously buttery stuffing and her boyfriend deep-fried a turkey in their driveway like a suburban dad cosplaying danger. My mom came by later with pie and cried again, which is becoming a theme. But at least this time she said the actual words. I should have believed what I was seeing. Aaron and I haven't repaired things. I don't think we will. There are certain betrayals that are not about one event. They're about what the event reveals. If she had called me and said, "I'm hurt and angry and I don't want you at the wedding," that would still have been terrible. But at least it would have been real. We could have fought about something real. Instead, she chose this smiling, slippery, humiliating little campaign where I was kept close enough to be useful and far enough away to be disposable. That changes the shape of a relationship. It also changed how I look at a lot of my family. Not everyone. Jenna is still Jenna. Grandma Jo is still Grandma Jo. Tessa is an accidental chaos agent, but I don't blame her. Honestly, if anything, she saved me from spending the next 5 years listening to some fake story about how schedules just didn't line up. But I see my mom differently now. I see the adults who prize smooth surfaces over truth. I see how easy it is in some families to disappear someone as long as the centerpiece candles are lit and the chicken comes out hot. The weirdest aftermath has been the social media part. Because of course there were photos. Endless photos. Aaron posted a carousel a week later with some caption about the most magical weekend of our lives. There was one full family shot on the lawn where the gap where I should have been hit me like a punch. Not because I wanted to be in the picture by then, but because it looked so normal. That was the haunting part. If you didn't know anything, it just looked like a beautiful wedding and a happy family. You would never know there was a lie threaded through the whole thing. A few people I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me after noticing I wasn't there. Most were polite and nosy in equal measure. "Wait, were you not at Aaron's wedding? Thought I'd see you in the pics. Did I miss something?" I didn't tell the full story to everybody. Mostly I just said, "Long story, not invited in the end." The people who knew my family well usually responded with some variation of, "Wow," and then a digital version of that face people make when they're not surprised enough. A month or two after the wedding, Aunt Lisa sent out Christmas cards with a photo from the reception. I wish I were kidding. Front of the card was Aaron and Cole doing that forehead touch pose under twinkle lights. Back of the card had a collage, including a smaller family photo. My mom almost didn't show it to me. But then she did because at that point hiding things had clearly gone so well for everyone. Inside, Aunt Lisa had handwritten, "Hope your season is full of grace and togetherness." I laughed so hard I scared my cat. To this day, I still think about the moment that Liv popped up on my phone. How casual it looked. How ordinary. Just a little notification in the middle of a Saturday. I clicked it the same way I might click a story of someone's brunch or dog. And instead I walked into the exact truth everyone had been trying to stage manage around me. If Tessa hadn't gone live, I honestly don't know how much longer they would have tried to drag the lie. Maybe I would have gotten some vague text after the honeymoon saying things got so chaotic, and they thought I were unavailable. Maybe my mom would have kept insisting it was a misunderstanding until she believed it herself. Maybe Erin would still tell herself she handled it kindly. Instead, there is a screen recording on my phone of my cousin getting married while I sit in an apartment miles away wearing leggings and holding a plastic fork. And somewhere in the background you can hear one of my relatives whisper, "Put the phone down." That's the whole thing to me. They weren't sorry I was hurt. They were sorry the camera was on. Story number 4. My daughter whispered, "Don't sleep in your bedroom tonight." I wish I'd asked why sooner. Last November, my daughter grabbed my sleeve while I was tucking her in and whispered, "Mom, don't sleep in your bedroom tonight." She said it so softly I almost made her repeat it. Hallie was 9 at the time. And she had that serious little kid face that always made her look older when she was scared. Not crying, not dramatic, just pale and tight around the mouth, like she was trying very hard not to break some rule. I laughed at first because I thought she was doing that thing kids do when they want one more trip. Out of bed. "Why, you planning to steal my side of the bed?" She shook her head immediately. "No, please, just don't." I remember the exact way her room looked when she said it. Her lamp was on low, the one with the white ceramic base from Target. She still had 3 stuffed animals lined up against her pillow like she was taking attendance. Her soccer bag was dumped by the closet because she had practice after school and forgot to put her cleats away. Everything about the room felt ordinary except her face. I asked, "Did you have a bad dream?" She shook her head again. "Is your brother messing with you?" "No." "Did Dad say something?" At that, her eyes flicked toward the hallway. Not at me, toward the hallway. Then she leaned even closer and said, "Please don't tell him I told you." That was the moment my stomach dropped. Up until then, I had been annoyed, tired in a normal mom way. I was 36, working full-time, still in my work clothes, makeup half gone. And just trying to get 2 kids into bed after a long day. But when she said, "Don't tell him I told you," I felt that cold, heavy thing that lands in your body before your brain catches up. I told her, "Okay, I won't." "But Hallie, what's going on?" She pressed her lips together so hard they went white. "Just sleep in the office tonight, please." Then she did something she hadn't done in years. She reached for my hand with both of hers and held on. I wish more than anything that I had sat down right there and refused to leave until she told me everything. I wish I had ignored bedtime, ignored being tired, ignored how badly I wanted to believe it was something small and weird and childish. I wish I had asked the next question harder. Instead, I did what I had been doing for months in my marriage and apparently in my house without realizing it. I accepted the version of reality that was easiest in the moment. I told her, "Okay, I'll sleep in the office if it makes you feel better." She let out this little breath like she'd been bracing for a no. For context, we lived in Naperville, Illinois. In one of those newer subdivisions where every house has gray siding and the same 3 landscaping bushes. My husband Jason was 39 and worked in medical device sales. I was an operations manager for a healthcare software company, mostly remote. But once every couple of months I had to go downtown for board meetings or vendor presentations. We had been married 10 years, together almost 12. Hallie was our oldest, and Max, our son, had just turned 5 and was still in the phase where every shirt had a dinosaur on it. From the outside, we were aggressively normal. 2 kids, Costco membership, Sunday Trader Joe's run, a minivan that always smelled faintly like goldfish crackers and wet soccer socks. We did summer block parties and school fundraisers and argued about whether we should finally replace the upstairs carpet. Jason coached Max's little t-ball team in the spring. I volunteered at Hallie's school book fair twice a year. We were not glamorous. We were the kind of family people assume is fine. And for a long time, I thought we were. That's what makes me feel stupid now, because there had been signs. Not movie-level obvious ones. Not lipstick on a collar. Just the kind of things you smooth over when you've built a whole adult life with someone and you do not want to start pulling at threads. Jason had gotten weird with his phone around the end of summer. He used to leave it face down on the kitchen island or forget it charging in the mudroom. Then suddenly it was always in his pocket, even when he was grilling. He started taking it into the bathroom. He changed the passcode from the kids' birthdays to something I didn't know. And when I jokingly asked if he'd joined the CIA, he said work had tightened security because of client data. He also started caring a lot more about the gym. Not in a midlife crisis convertible way, more in a new fitted quarter zips, expensive sneakers, and a very specific brand of cologne way. He lost maybe 15 pounds. Started getting haircuts every 3 weeks instead of every 2 months. At the time, I told myself it was good, healthy, better than him sitting on the couch drinking IPAs every night. The biggest change, though, wasn't Jason. It was Hallie. Hallie had always been observant. Even as a toddler she noticed everything. If I moved a picture frame 3 inches to the left, she'd ask why. If someone at school said something in a weird tone, Hallie would come home and accurately explain the entire social situation like a tiny therapist. She was the kind of kid who remembered that Mrs. Keller from next door had switched from Cherry Coke to Diet Dr. Pepper after her last doctor visit. Around September, she got clingier with me in a way that didn't fit her age. Not tantrum clingy, protective clingy. She started hovering when I packed for work overnights downtown. She'd stand in my doorway and ask how late I'd be back, what hotel, whether I had to go, for real, or if I could maybe come home after dinner. One Thursday, when I was straightening my hair in the bathroom before leaving, she asked me, out of nowhere, if parents get divorced, does the mom always move out? I turned the straightener off and laughed because I thought she was bringing home some school gossip. No, why are you asking that? She shrugged too fast and said, a girl in my class said that's what happened to her cousin. Another time she asked if grown-ups can have secrets from each other and still count as honest. That one bothered me enough that I asked Jason if he thought something was going on with her at school. He said she was probably just getting older and more anxious. And honestly I let him lead me there because that explanation was easier. Hallie had always been a little high-strung. She hated loud birthday parties and cried the first week of every new school year no matter how Much she liked her teacher. So I filed it under Hallie being Hallie. A couple weeks before the night she warned me, she brought home a family drawing from school. Me, Jason, Hallie, Max, our dog Winston. Very normal, except there was another woman standing in the kitchen in a blue dress. Blonde hair, curly, no face, just there. I asked, "Who's this?" She looked at it for a second too long and said, "Nobody." I messed up. I still remember I almost pressed. Then Max spilled apple juice all over the dining table. And the moment got swallowed like moments always do in family life. The night everything blew up, I was actually supposed to be staying at a hotel in River North. We had a 2-day leadership meeting downtown. And because the Friday session started at 7 in the morning, my company booked rooms for the suburban people. I drove in Thursday morning, did the whole day in a freezing conference room. Ate a sad salad at lunch, and was expecting to stay overnight. Then around 6:30, our Friday agenda got cut in half because one of our vendors had a system issue and 2 of the presentations were moved to Zoom for the following week. My boss basically said if we wanted to head home and dial in from home the next day, that was fine. I texted Jason. Friday got moved remote. Heading home, should be there by 8:30. No response, which wasn't unusual. Evenings were chaos with the kids. I remember feeling weirdly happy driving back. It was one of those cold Illinois nights where the highway lights make everything look metallic. I had NPR on, then switched to early 2000s music because I was tired and wanted something familiar. I stopped at a gas station near Downers Grove and bought a Diet Coke and peanut M&Ms. It was all very normal. When I walked in the front door a little after 8:30, Jason was in the kitchen and physically jumped. I mean actually jumped, like shoulders up, hand off the counter, startled. He recovered fast and smiled, but it was the wrong kind of smile. Too quick, too bright. "You're home?" I held up my laptop bag. "Surprise?" Max came tearing in from the living room in dinosaur pajamas and launched himself at my legs. Hallie came around the corner slower. She looked relieved for 1 second, then immediately anxious again. That should have been enough right there. The house smelled like my vanilla candle from the family room. But under that there was another smell. Sweet, perfume, definitely, not mine. I wore the same clean, boring glossier skin scent for years, and this was stronger. Floral, expensive, very department store counter. I asked Jason if somebody had been over. He said, "No, why?" I said, "The house smells different." He laughed, maybe because I actually cleaned the kitchen for once. Again, very easy to dismiss. Life gives you 100 little moments like that. And you can either make them into something or let them slide. I slid. Then Jason said, way too casually, "Don't go up to our room yet." I kind of tore apart the closet looking for the extension cords and it's a disaster. I remember making a face. "Why were you looking for extension cords in our closet?" He said Max wanted the twinkle lights from the storage bin for a fort. Which made just enough sense because Max was constantly trying to turn the house into a campsite. Hallie was standing by the island, and when Jason said that, she looked down at her hands. We did bedtime later than usual because the kids were excited I was home. I helped Max brush his teeth while he gave me a 5-minute monologue about a T-Rex skeleton his class had seen in a book. Jason hung back in the hallway more than usual. He kept checking his phone and then shoving it into his pocket when I looked over. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then I tucked Max in, and he passed out within 3 minutes like he always did. Hallie was next, and that's when she whispered what she whispered. After I left her room, I went downstairs and stood at the sink staring out the black window over the backyard. Jason was loading plates into the dishwasher. I said, "Hallie seems off." He shrugged. "She got weird when you got home." That answer annoyed me. She got weird because I got home? You know what I mean. I turned around. Did something happen? He looked right at me and said, "No." Why would something have happened? There are moments, when you replay them later, where you realize someone was not answering your question. They were managing you. That was one of them. I said I had a headache and was going to sleep in the office because I had an early call anyway. The office was our small downstairs guest room with a desk jammed in one corner and a pull-out couch. That was better than it had any right to be. Jason stared at me for maybe a second too long before saying, "Since when do you sleep in there when you have a headache?" I said, "Since right now." He laughed again, but not like anything was funny. I changed in the little guest bathroom, left the light off, and sat on the pull-out couch in the dark with my phone in my hand and my heart pounding so hard I Could feel it in my throat. Winston, our old golden retriever, climbed up halfway onto the couch with me and let out this sigh like I was inconveniencing him. I kept thinking, this is ridiculous. I'm a grown woman hiding in my own office because my 9-year-old said something spooky. Any minute Jason is going to come in and tell me Hallie watched some creepy YouTube short at a sleepover and now she thinks the bedroom is haunted. But I couldn't shake it. At around 11:15, I heard the stairs creak. Our house had one stair, the fourth from the top. That made a distinct popping sound no matter how lightly you stepped. I heard it once, then nothing. A few minutes later, I heard a muffled thump from upstairs. Then I heard Jason's voice. Low, not loud enough to make out words, but definitely talking. I got off the couch so fast Winston lifted his head like what now? The house was dark except for the nightlight in the upstairs hallway. When I got to the top of the stairs, our bedroom door was almost closed. Not fully, just enough that a line of warm light showed across the carpet. I heard another sound, not Jason this time, a woman clearing her throat. My body went completely cold. I don't even remember deciding to push the door open. I just remember my hand on the brass knob and the smell hitting me first. Perfume. The same one from earlier, but stronger now. Mixed with Jason's cologne and the fabric softener I used on our sheets. Jason was standing by the bed in a t-shirt and boxers, frozen like I'd caught him mid-crime. Which I had. And then, because apparently life can be both devastating and humiliating in ways that feel almost theatrical, a phone started buzzing from inside my closet. Not on the bed, not in the bathroom, in my closet. I looked at Jason. He said, "Lauren." I shoved past him and yanked the closet door open. There was a woman crouched between my hanging winter coats and the laundry hamper, holding a pair of nude heels in one hand like that somehow made the situation better. I knew her. Not well, but enough. Tessa, early 30s, worked in Jason's regional office. I'd met her twice at company holiday parties. Blonde, blowout, very white teeth. The kind of woman who said, "You look amazing," in a way that somehow made you feel worse. She was wearing black pants and one of those silky wrap tops. Hair perfect. Face blotchy because now she was crying. For a second, nobody moved. Then I just said, "Are you kidding me?" That was it. Not a scream, not some dramatic movie speech. Just that, because my brain had flatlined. Jason started talking immediately, fast and useless. "It's not, listen, Lauren, please listen, this is not." And Tessa, from inside my closet, actually said, "He told me you were staying downtown." That sentence did something to me. I looked at Jason and said, "You brought her to our house?" Not a hotel, not her place, not his car like a pathetic cliché. My house. While my kids were upstairs. While my daughter was so scared she whispered me a warning like we were in some kind of hostage situation. That's when I did start yelling. I asked her to get out of my closet. I asked him if he had lost his mind. I asked how many times this had happened in my house. I said things I don't fully remember and probably don't need to repeat. The only thing I remember word for word is saying, "My daughter knew enough to warn me, and you are standing here acting like I need context." Tessa came out of the closet crying, trying not to look at me. And Jason kept putting one hand toward me like he was calming a horse. I told him not to touch me. I also told Tessa if she did not get out of my house in the next 10 seconds. I was calling the police, and I meant it even though I had no idea what I'd say. Adultery? Trespassing? Stupidity? She grabbed her shoes and purse and went for the door. And Jason followed her into the hallway for 1 second like he was going to explain something to her, which almost made me black out from rage. That was when I heard Hallie. Not crying, just standing in the hallway in her pink pajama shorts. Looking about as old as I have ever seen her look. She was holding Max's hand. Max was half asleep and confused. Hallie had gotten him out of bed. She saw Tessa. Tessa saw her. Jason saw Hallie seeing Tessa. And in that one awful second, I knew this was not the first time my daughter had seen that woman in my house. I don't know if Jason realized I knew it in that exact moment too. But something changed in his face. Not guilt, more like fear that a different story was now about to come out. I took Max from Hallie and told both kids to go into Hallie's room and shut the door. Max started crying because kids cry when grown-ups sound wrong. Hallie didn't cry. She just did exactly what I said. Tessa left. I heard the front door open and close. Jason started saying my name over and over like repetition would help him. I said, "How long?" He said, "Lauren." I said, louder, "How long?" He sat down on the edge of my bed. In the room he had apparently been preparing for his affair partner while I drove home on I-88. Listening to Kelly Clarkson like an idiot, and said, "A few months." I asked if it had happened in the house before. He hesitated. That was my answer. I cannot describe what that felt like without sounding dramatic, and maybe dramatic is deserved. The affair itself was one thing. Horrible, yes. Marriage ending, yes. But the house part made me feel filthier than I knew a person could feel. My closet, my bed, my kids sleeping down the hall. I told him to get out. He said we needed to talk. I said if he didn't leave right then, I would wake the whole neighborhood. He asked where he was supposed to go at midnight. I said I genuinely did not care. He finally called his brother Chris, who lived 20 minutes away in Wheaton and sounded very awake very fast when I got on the phone, and said, "Your brother just got caught with another woman in my closet. Come get him." Chris arrived in sweatpants and a Bears hoodie and wouldn't look me in the face because he was embarrassed by association. Jason tried once more, quietly, to say we should keep it calm for the kids. I laughed in his face. Not because it was funny. Because the audacity was so high it broke something in me. After he left, I went into Hallie's room. She was sitting against the headboard with Max asleep against her shoulder. She looked exhausted, older, guilty, which made me want to throw up, because none of it belonged to her. I sat on the bed and said, "Honey, you did nothing wrong." She burst into tears so hard she started hiccuping. What came out of her over the next hour is the part that still keeps me up sometimes. The first time she saw Tessa in our house was in September, on one of my downtown overnights. Jason had told the kids they could have movie night in the basement. Hallie came upstairs to get the fuzzy blanket from the hall closet and saw Tessa in the kitchen, laughing with Jason while he poured wine. He told Hallie that Tessa was a work friend helping him plan a surprise for me. He made it sound normal, adult, temporary. Hallie asked why the surprise needed to happen at night. He told her because surprises are more fun that way. The second time, she came downstairs after bedtime because she heard voices and saw Jason kiss Tessa in the mudroom by the garage door. She knew then that whatever was happening was not a normal work friend thing. When Jason realized she saw them, he pulled her aside and told her something I think I will hate him for until the day I die. He said, "Sometimes grown-ups keep complicated things private until the timing is right. If Mom hears about this the wrong way, she'll get upset and she might leave. And it'll be because you didn't trust me." Imagine being 9 and hearing your dad hand you the stability of your entire life like it's a package you are responsible for carrying correctly. Hallie told me she started feeling sick on the nights I went downtown. She would lie awake listening for the garage door. She said sometimes Tessa came after Max was asleep. Sometimes she was already there before bedtime. Once, Hallie heard them in our room laughing and turned her TV up so Max wouldn't hear. I asked why she didn't tell me sooner, and she cried even harder and said, "I tried." That was the part that gutted me. She had tried, in 9-year-old ways. The questions about divorce, the family drawing, the weird comments about honesty. Once, apparently, she had stood in my bathroom doorway while I was getting ready for work and said, "If somebody is doing something bad but they say it's to keep the family together, does that make it less bad?" I vaguely remembered that conversation. I had been late for a meeting and told her we could talk after school. I never circled back. The reason she whispered to me that specific night was because Tessa had already been upstairs. Before I got home, Jason had expected me to stay in Chicago. Hallie said Tessa came through the side door around 8, and Jason took her straight upstairs. Then my text came through that I was heading home. Hallie saw Jason Reddit at the island and start swearing under his breath. He rushed Tessa into our bedroom and told Hallie not to say anything because Mom will ruin the surprise if she finds out too early. By the time I walked through the door, that woman was already in my room. That's why Hallie told me not to sleep there. Not because she wanted to save me from heartbreak in some abstract way. Because she knew, physically, literally, there was another woman hidden in my bedroom and she did not know how else to stop me from walking into it. I sat on the edge of her bed that night and felt this crushing mix of rage and guilt so intense I could barely breathe. Rage at Jason for cheating, obviously. Rage at him for using our daughter as cover. Rage at myself for missing what was right in front of me because I was busy being practical and tired and trying to keep life moving. And guilt because she had been carrying an adult secret in a child body for weeks. The next morning, I called in to work and told them I had a family emergency. My sister Megan came over around 7 with coffee and bagels, and that look sisters get when they're already halfway to wanting to bury somebody in a field. Hallie barely spoke. Max mostly wanted to know why Daddy wasn't making pancakes. Jason texted nonstop. Please let me explain. I never wanted Hallie involved. I made a huge mistake. Don't do anything rash. We owe the kids a calm conversation. That last one almost sent me through a wall. I told him the kids already had a calm conversation with reality while he was hiding his coworker in my closet. By noon, his mother had called me. That was fun. She started with, "I'm not excusing what Jason did," which is the opening line of every person about to excuse what someone did. Then she moved quickly into how marriages go through rough patches. How men sometimes make selfish choices when they feel disconnected. How the children should be protected from adult details. I said, "Your granddaughter was used to keep the adult details hidden." Silence. Then she said Hallie was a sensitive child and may have misunderstood some things at first. I still do not know how I didn't throw my phone into the DuPage River. Within 48 hours, I had learned more about Jason's affair than I ever wanted to know. Because once you stop protecting somebody, information starts arriving fast. There were texts on our shared iPad he had forgotten to wipe. Mostly logistical. When can you come over? Is she out tonight? Kids asleep. Miss your legs. The kind of garbage that looks even uglier when it's typed in bubbles. There were hotel receipts from sales trainings that apparently had very little to do with sales training. There were credit card charges for restaurants I knew he had never taken me to. There were messages from Tessa that made it clear she had been in my house at least 5 times. Maybe more. One of the worst texts, maybe the worst, was from Tessa asking, "Little one saw me again. Is that okay?" And Jason wrote back, "She's fine. I told her it's work stuff and she won't say anything." I stared at that message for a full minute. Not she doesn't understand. Not I'll fix it. She won't say anything. Like our daughter was just another risk variable he decided he could manage. He moved into a furnished short-term rental near Oak Brook within the week. Not because he wanted to give me space, but because Chris told him if he didn't remove himself from the situation, he was going to make everything worse. For once, Chris was right. The first time Jason came by to see the kids after that, Hallie would not be alone with him. She stood next to me in the kitchen and wouldn't even go get her shoes for the park unless I walked upstairs with her. Jason cried, actual tears, said he hated himself, said he never meant to hurt her, said he had compartmentalized. I told him that was a nice corporate word for using your child as a shield. Hallie started therapy 2 weeks later. The first therapist she clicked with was a woman in Lisle with a warm office and a giant basket of fidget toys. Hallie told her she felt like she had swallowed a rock. She also admitted that part of her had been mad at me, which I deserved to hear. She said she didn't understand how I didn't know. She thought moms just knew things. That one hurt in a different way. I had always been the parent who knew when a fever was coming before the thermometer said it. I knew when Max was lying because his left eyebrow twitched. I knew when Hallie was fake fine because she got overly helpful and started cleaning. And yet I had not known this, even with it moving around inside my own house. I don't blame her for that. Max was easier only because he was younger. His understanding was basically that Daddy lived in an apartment now and sometimes forgot where his blue sneakers were. He asked once if Daddy got in trouble at work, and I said no. Daddy made some bad grown-up choices. He accepted that and asked for waffles. Kids can be mercifully practical like that until they get older. There were more little things Hallie told me over the next few months. And each one made me feel worse. Like the fact that on nights I was away, she sometimes slept with her bedroom door cracked so she could hear if anyone came in. Or the fact that she had once put one of my sweatshirts under her pillow because it smelled like me and made her feel less nervous. Or that she had started hating Thursdays, not because of school, but because Thursdays were usually my downtown nights. I canceled every non-essential overnight work trip after that. My boss was actually decent about it. We shifted things around. I still had to go downtown sometimes, but I drove home every time, even if it meant getting back late. For a while Hallie wanted visual proof of where I was sleeping. Not in a dramatic way, just quietly. If I said I was going to shower and come to bed, she'd say, "Which bed?" with this tiny note of worry in her voice. So I started answering directly. "Mine, down the hall, same place." Later, when I moved into a rental townhouse during the divorce because staying in the house felt like living inside a contaminated memory, Hallie helped me set up my room first. Before the couch. Before the kitchen stuff. Before unpacking Max's dinosaur bedding. She said, I just want to know where you are. There were plenty of people who wanted my energy during the divorce. Jason wanted forgiveness. His mother wanted civility. Tessa's husband wanted details. My own parents wanted updates. Friends wanted the story over wine. Lawyers wanted documentation. Everybody wanted a version of me that could process the affair like an adult administrative task. The only person I really cared about not failing was Hallie. Jason and I are not together now, obviously. The divorce took almost a year because once money, custody, and house equity get involved, human beings become spreadsheets with trauma attached. He tried for a while to pitch reconciliation. Therapy, time, a fresh start. He cried in my driveway one Sunday and said he was a broken person who made broken choices. Maybe that's true. Plenty of broken people manage not to stash their mistress in a closet while their daughter keeps watch like a traumatized little lookout, but maybe that's just me being picky. Tessa is gone from his life as far as I know. Or maybe she isn't. I stopped making it my job to know. I did speak to her husband once because he called me after finding my number. That was one of the grimmest conversations of my life. Two strangers comparing damage. The old house sold in the spring. I thought I'd feel more emotional about it, but mostly I felt relieved. The day we did the final walkthrough, I stood in the empty bedroom and looked at the closet for a long time. Same beige walls. Same cheap wire shelves. Same harmless suburban nothingness. It was almost insulting that a place could look so ordinary after being the backdrop for something that ugly. Hallie didn't want to go inside. I didn't make her. What I think about most now isn't the actual moment I opened the closet door. It's the whisper before that. The way she clutched my sleeve and asked me not to tell him she told me. The fact that she had figured out, at 9, that truth in our house was dangerous if it moved in the wrong direction. That's the part one keep returning to. Not because I enjoy torturing myself, but because it explains so much. Kids do not usually become secret keepers by accident. They become secret keepers because an adult teaches them that peace depends on silence. For months after the divorce started, Hallie would sometimes ask weirdly practical questions that sounded casual if you didn't know better. Stuff like, if someone lies a lot, do they know they're lying while they're doing it? Or, when people say they love you and also hurt you, do they mean one more than the other? I answered as honestly as I could without turning her into my therapist. Usually I said some version of, sometimes people love you and still make selfish choices. That doesn't make the choices okay. Her own therapist probably phrased it better. She's doing better now, not magically, better in the real way. She laughs the right way again. Sleeps through most nights. Goes to soccer and sleepovers and middle school orientation stuff without carrying that tense little adult energy in her shoulders. Max mostly just cares whether Jason lets him have too much screen time at his apartment, which, yes, he absolutely does. A few weeks ago, Hallie was sprawled across my couch doing a summer reading assignment and asked if I remembered that night. I said yes. She was quiet for a second and then said, I thought if you slept in there, it would make it more real. I asked what she meant. She said, like if you walked in and saw it, then our family would break all the way. I didn't know what to say to that, because the truth is our family had already broken all the way. She was just the only one in the house who knew it before I did. So I put down the laundry basket I was holding and sat next to her and told her what I should have said a long time ago. I said, it was never your job to hold any of that together. She nodded like she understood, but there was still sadness in it. Maybe there always will be. At night now, I still check on both kids before I go to bed. Even when Hallie pretends she's too old for that and rolls her eyes if I kiss her forehead. Sometimes she's asleep with one arm hanging off the side of the bed, totally peaceful. Sometimes she's half awake and says, you going to bed too? And every single time, I answer her. Every single time, I tell her exactly where I'm sleeping. Story number 5. My wife left for a business conference every month. One hotel employee finally told me the truth. I'm 38, my wife Natalie is 36, and we've been married for 11 years. We live outside Charlotte, North Carolina. In one of those neighborhoods where every third house has a white SUV in the driveway and somebody is always posting on Facebook asking if the brown lab on Willow Creek Drive belongs to anyone. We have a 10-year-old son, Carter, a 7-year-old daughter, Sophie. And a very dumb but lovable goldendoodle named Moose who thinks every visitor is specifically there to see him. From the outside, our life looked solid. Not perfect, but solid. I work as a project manager for a commercial roofing company. It's not glamorous, but it pays well and it's stable. Natalie works in pharmaceutical marketing, which honestly I only partly understand even after listening to her explain it for years. She's always been sharper than me in a corporate way. Good at presentations, good at reading a room, good at sounding confident even when she's figuring things out as she goes. She's the kind of person who could complain to a hotel front desk and walk away with free champagne and a room upgrade. For most of our marriage, I was proud of that about her. About 3 years ago, Natalie started going to what she called a monthly regional strategy conference. That was how she always phrased it. Not a work trip, not a meeting, always a regional strategy conference. It happened once a month, almost always from Thursday afternoon to Saturday morning. And almost always in Raleigh. That was just far enough away to make driving home inconvenient, but close enough that it sounded reasonable. About 2.5 hours from us if traffic on I-85 wasn't a mess. Her company's East Coast hub was supposedly there. And she said several different teams met in person one weekend a month because half their work was remote and upper management wanted everyone to stay connected. That sounded corporate enough that I never questioned it. At first, the trips were irregular. A month would get skipped. Then they became consistent. Like clockwork, third Thursday of the month, usually. She'd pack a rolling carry-on, complain about how boring the agenda would be, kiss the kids, and head out looking like she was going to a conference room in a blazer and white sneakers. I handled the house. I coached Carter's rec baseball team. Made boxed mac and cheese for Sophie because she refused to eat anything green unless it was street Patrick's Day, and tried not to let the dog drag me across the neighborhood during his walks. It wasn't a big deal. Marriage is trade-offs. She had demanding travel. I had busier hours during roofing season. We covered for each other. If you had asked me a year ago whether I trusted my wife, I would have said yes without even pausing. The first crack was not dramatic. It wasn't lipstick or a suspicious text or somebody seeing her at a restaurant. It was actually my sister, Dana. Dana is 2 years older than me, divorced, and deeply suspicious of anything that sounds too polished. If you tell Dana someone is great with people, she hears professional liar. She came over for Carter's birthday last year and saw Natalie packing in our room. Natalie joked that she was thrilled to spend another weekend trapped in a Marriott ballroom, listening to people say synergy. After Natalie left, Dana helped me clean up wrapping paper and cake plates, then asked, "She really has that conference every month?" I said yeah. Dana raised an eyebrow. "Every month is a lot." I shrugged and said that was just her industry. Dana didn't push, but I could tell she thought it was weird. I wrote it off because Dana thinks everything is weird. Dana once became convinced her ex-husband was hiding money because he started buying premium gas. It turned out he just got a different truck. Still, once someone says a thing out loud, sometimes it starts echoing. After that, I noticed details I probably should have noticed sooner. Natalie never talked about these conferences the way normal people talk about work travel. If I went on a job site out of town, I'd come home with stories about a guy who forgot a permit, or a weird lunch place, or a subcontractor who nearly backed a forklift into a retaining wall. Natalie never had stories, not real ones, just bland comments like, "Same hotel food as always," or, "You'd die of boredom if you saw those presentations." She also never brought anything home. No lanyards, no conference folders, no swag bags, no hotel notepad. No crumpled receipts in her purse, nothing. If she was gone for 2 nights, she came back with the same immaculate little carry-on and somehow not a single sign she had actually been anywhere. Again, each thing by itself was easy to explain. Some people travel light, some conferences are boring, some companies are increasingly digital. But the feeling started. Then there was the phone. Natalie had always been private, but not secretive. There's a difference. Private is taking a call in the other room because you don't want kids screaming in the background. Secretive is flipping your phone face down every time you leave it on the counter and suddenly taking it into the shower with you like the FBI has issued a warning. She changed her passcode sometime last fall. I only noticed because one night I asked her to pull up the recipe for those turkey meatballs she saved from Instagram, and she said her phone was in the bedroom. I went to grab it and the code I thought I knew didn't work. When I teased her about changing it, She said her company had tightened mobile security because of compliance issues. I remember nodding like that meant something to me. Then Christmas came, and one of Natalie's conferences landed on the second week of January. I remember because Sophie cried when Natalie was packing and asked why she had to leave again. Natalie told her it was just part of being a grown-up and having responsibilities. Then she looked at me with this faint irritation. Like Sophie's sadness was somehow my failure to manage. That annoyed me more than it should have, but I still didn't say anything. A couple months later, Carter had a school spring concert on a Friday night. And Natalie almost missed it because her conference was running long. She came in halfway through the choir performance, hair freshly curled, lipstick touched up. Not looking like someone who'd been in meetings all day. She slid into the seat next to me smelling like expensive perfume and hotel soap. I said, "Long day?" She whispered back, "Absolute nightmare." Then she smiled brightly for photos afterward and told Carter he sounded amazing. On the drive home, he asked why Mom's work meetings always happened when he had something going on. That one got under my skin. I still did nothing. I need to be honest about my own part in this. Because if I tell this like I had all the clues and was bravely putting together a case, that would be a lie. The truth is I avoided looking too hard because I didn't want to be the paranoid husband. I didn't want to become one of those guys who counts receipts and checks location history and turns his whole personality into suspicion. I grew up with a father like that after my mom cheated on him when I was 15. Once he got burned, every woman in the world became a suspect. He checked odometers. He called landlines and hung up if a man answered. He turned himself into someone I could barely stand being around. I made a promise to myself when I got older that I would never live like that. So when Natalie grew distant, I explained it away as stress. When she seemed irritated by normal family noise, I told myself her job was demanding. When sex became more infrequent and weirdly scheduled, I thought maybe we were just in that mid-marriage, young kids stretch people talk about in podcasts and articles. We still functioned. We discussed summer camp. We argued over whether Carter was ready for a travel team. We watched Netflix on the couch sometimes, though she usually had one eye on her phone. We had friends over for burgers. We took family photos in matching blue outfits at the fall festival like every suburban family. Pretending not to hate coordinated pictures. If there was rot underneath it, I did what people do. I set the table on top of it and kept eating dinner. The trip that changed everything happened in May. Natalie left on a Thursday afternoon, same as usual. Navy blazer, cream blouse, black rolling suitcase. She kissed Sophie on the head, told Carter not to leave his wet towel on the floor, and reminded me that Moose had a grooming appointment Saturday at 11. I remember that specifically because it bothered me that she could be headed to some supposedly important work event and still be thinking about dog grooming. Thursday night was normal. I made frozen pizza, helped Carter with a science worksheet about erosion. Listened to Sophie tell me for 15 straight minutes about how Ava in her class was definitely lying about having a mini pig at her aunt's farm, and went to bed around 10:30. Friday morning, I got up before the kids because I had an early site check in Gastonia. I was halfway through a cup of coffee when my phone buzzed with a fraud alert from our credit card company. It asked whether I had authorized a charge at the Hanover Grand in downtown Raleigh for $487.62. I almost hit yes automatically. Hotel charges during one of Natalie's trips wouldn't be weird. Then I stopped because Natalie always said her company booked and covered the hotel directly. Sometimes meals too. Occasionally I'd see a small coffee or Uber charge, but not a nearly $500 hotel bill on our joint card. I texted her, "Hey, got a fraud alert for a hotel charge in Raleigh. Is that yours?" No answer. I waited 10 minutes, then called. Straight to voicemail. That wasn't impossible if she was in a meeting, but it put a little knot in my stomach. About 20 minutes later she texted back, "Yep, mine. Had to switch rooms because of a booking issue and I used our card. I'll expense it Monday." That should have settled it. It almost did, but the wording bothered me. Natalie was very exact when she was telling the truth. This felt rushed, vague. A booking issue. Not, they lost my reservation, or the company portal messed up, or my card on file didn't work. Just a booking issue. Still, I had work to do. Real life keeps moving even when something starts itching at the back of your brain. Later that afternoon, I was sitting in my truck outside a supply yard eating gas station peanuts when Dana called. She was on speaker while I drove back toward Charlotte. And I mentioned the fraud alert because I was half laughing about how adult life is basically just payments and passwords. Dana said, "Wait, I thought her company booked those trips." I said they usually did. Dana was quiet for a second, then asked, "What hotel?" I told her. She said, "That's not like a conference hotel, Ethan. That's like a boutique place for weddings and rooftop cocktails." I said maybe their normal place was full. She said, "Maybe. Or maybe your wife really loves strategy." I told her to knock it off. She did, mostly, but once the call ended I looked up the Hanover Grand at a red light. Dana was right. It was not a depressing business hotel by an airport. It was one of those renovated historic properties with velvet headboards, a rooftop bar, and a lobby that looked like it smelled like bergamot and money. The website had couples drinking old fashions under string lights. There was a wedding package tab. I sat there feeling stupid for even caring. Plenty of work events happen at nice hotels. Then I noticed the date. There was no major conference listed that weekend on the hotel events page. No pharma convention. No corporate summit. I put the phone down and drove home. If the story ended there, maybe I would have confronted her and gotten some believable lie and buried it again. I honestly don't know. What actually pushed me over the edge was something smaller. That night, Sophie asked to FaceTime Natalie before bed. She missed her. Friday nights were usually pizza and movie nights with Natalie if she was home. And Sophie is a routine kid. Natalie answered after a few rings. She was smiling, but she looked flushed. And the background behind her was dim and didn't look like a hotel room so much as a restaurant patio. There were lights behind her and I swear I heard live music. Sophie said, "Are you at dinner?" Natalie blinked and said, "Just a team thing." Then a man laughed somewhere off screen. Not close enough to definitely mean anything. But there. Natalie angled the phone away fast and started asking Sophie about school. After the call ended, Carter said, "Mom always has more fun at conferences than she says." I asked what he meant. He shrugged and said, "I don't know. She always says they're boring, but she smiles the whole time when she's getting ready." Kids notice things. They don't always understand them, but they notice. I barely slept Friday night. Not because I had proof. I didn't. Just because for the first time, the shape of the suspicion had become too obvious to ignore. The next morning, I took Moose to the groomer because life is humiliatingly normal even when your marriage might be falling apart. I came home, cleaned up cereal bowls, started a load of towels, and kept checking my phone like I was waiting for a weather warning. Around noon, Natalie texted that she'd be back by 3. At 1:30, I did something I'd never done in our marriage. I called the hotel. I wish I could say I had some clever plan, but I didn't. I just called the front desk and asked to be connected to my wife's room. I used her full name and tried to sound casual. The girl at the desk said, "I'm sorry, sir, we don't seem to have a guest by that name." I said maybe the reservation was under a corporate booking or another variation of her name. I gave her Natalie Harper and Natalie James Harper. She checked again. Nothing. I hung up and sat there staring at the kitchen wall while the washing machine thumped in the laundry room. There are 1,000 explanations, I told myself. Maybe she switched hotels. Maybe she checked out already. Maybe she used a nickname. Maybe the hotel protects guest info. But then why the charge? I called the credit card company and asked for the merchant detail. Same hotel. Not pending at a restaurant or spa. Lodging. At that point I wanted to confront her immediately. But I also knew if she lied and I had nothing else, I'd end up talking myself into whatever version made the least mess. So I waited. Natalie got home at 3:20. She came in with sunglasses in her hair, her suitcase rolling behind her. Looking sun-kissed and relaxed. Not exhausted, not meeting weary, relaxed. She kissed me on the cheek and said traffic had been awful. I asked how the conference was. She dropped her bag by the stairs and said, "Mind-numbing. I'm so glad to be home." I said, "What hotel did they put you in?" She looked at me, just for half a second too long. "The usual Marriott by North Hills." I said, "Not the Hanover Grand?" Her face changed so fast it was almost impressive. Not panic exactly, more like recalculating. Then she laughed and said, "No, the Hanover is where we had drinks one night." "Why?" I told her about the charge. She didn't even blink. "Oh right, one of the team dinners got posted weird because I paid and they reimbursed me through payroll." I forgot. That wasn't what she'd texted Friday. I said, "You told me it was a room charge because of a booking issue." She frowned like I was the one being difficult. Ethan, I was in between sessions and typing fast. I meant it was a hotel charge, not that I booked a room personally. I wanted to believe her so badly it actually made me angry. I said, I called there earlier and they said no one by your name was staying there. That was when the warmth left her face. She set her purse down very carefully and said, you called my hotel. I said yes. She crossed her arms. That is insane. I said, is it? What followed was one of those fights where the original issue gets instantly buried beneath outrage about process. Natalie didn't answer the question. She attacked the fact that I had called at all. She said it was controlling, humiliating, and creepy. She asked if I was going to start tracking her location next. She brought up my father, which she knew was a low blow. She said maybe she didn't tell me every tiny administrative detail because she didn't think I'd interrogate her over credit card charges like some jealous husband on cable TV. And I let her flip it. That's the part I'm still embarrassed about. I backed off, not fully, but enough. I said the stories didn't line up. She said I was looking for reasons not to trust her. I asked directly if there was someone else. She said no with enough indignation that I felt like garbage for asking. Then she cried. I know people on Reddit love to act like tears are always a manipulation. But life is messier than that. Sometimes tears are manipulation. Sometimes tears are anger. Sometimes people cry because they hate being cornered, even when they deserve it. I still don't know which kind hers were. By that evening, we had achieved that awful fake peace married people know too well. We were civil. We fed the kids. We sat through Carter's baseball game with folding chairs and sunflower seed shells underfoot. Natalie clapped at the right moments and chatted with another mom about summer camps like her life was perfectly ordinary. I almost convinced myself to drop it. A week later, I got the truth because a stranger took pity on me. Natalie had another conference scheduled the following month. Same pattern. Third Thursday. She told me she might have to leave even earlier because this one involved a dinner with leadership. I said okay, and I hated how normal my voice sounded. But this time, I decided I wasn't going to sit at home arguing with myself. I took Friday off work. I told Natalie I had a supplier meeting in Hickory and probably wouldn't be reachable for chunks of the day. She left Thursday afternoon. Friday morning, after dropping the kids with my mom because I said I had site visits, I drove to Raleigh. The whole drive there I felt sick. Not dramatic movie sick. Just that low-grade buzzing nausea you get when you know whatever happens next is going to divide your life into before and after. I did not have a grand plan. I just knew I needed to see something with my own eyes. I got to Raleigh around 11 and parked in a public garage 2 blocks from the Hanover Grand. My hands were sweating on the steering wheel. I sat there for almost 10 minutes watching people cross the street with coffees and laptop bags, wondering if I had completely lost my mind. Then I went inside. The lobby was exactly what the website promised. Polished dark wood, brass light fixtures. The kind of floral arrangement that looks expensive because it's intentionally sparse. A pianist was playing in the bar area even though it was barely lunchtime. Everyone there looked too put together. I felt like a guy in a roofing company polo who had wandered into somebody else's life. I went to the front desk and asked if the rooftop restaurant took walk-ins. The woman there said yes, but the lounge area upstairs would probably be easier. She smiled in that professional way hotel people do where you can't tell if they're actually warm or just highly trained. I went upstairs. At first, I didn't see Natalie. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I kept thinking maybe I'd gotten it wrong. Maybe she really did have some weird work thing here once a month. Maybe I was about to become the pathetic husband lurking around a hotel for no reason. Then I saw her. She was at a corner table near the windows, facing away from the main stairs. She wasn't in conference clothes. She was wearing a green sundress I'd never seen before, the one-shoulder kind, with gold earrings and her hair down in loose waves. A drink with fruit in it was on the table. Across from her sat a man maybe a few years older than us, dark hair, tan, expensive watch. Laughing at something she just said. They were not talking like coworkers. You know how sometimes a scene tells you everything before your brain can even start listing the details. The way she leaned in. The way his hand rested near hers on the table. The way she looked at him with that bright, younger expression I hadn't seen turned on me in a long time. It was all there. I don't remember walking over. I just remember being there. Natalie looked up first. Her entire face emptied. The man turned, confused. I said, "So this is the conference." Neither of them spoke. Then the guy stood up and said, "I think I should go." Natalie said his name fast, under her breath. Gavin. So now I had the name. I said, "No, actually, I think you should stay. Since apparently my wife keeps using our family calendar to schedule hotel weekends with you." He looked from her to me and back like he was trying to determine what level of disaster he'd walked into. Natalie stood up so fast her chair scraped. "Ethan, stop." I laughed because that was insane. "Stop what?" "Stop noticing." I asked him, "Do you know she has 2 kids who think she's at a work conference right now?" He looked genuinely uncomfortable then, which almost made it worse. Like he knew enough to be ashamed, just not enough to stop. Natalie hissed, "Can we not do this here?" I said, "You've been doing this here every month." That was when Gavin picked up his phone and muttered something about giving us space. He did leave then, which I expected. But not before placing his hand lightly on Natalie's back for half a second. That tiny gesture almost broke me more than catching them at the table. It was casual, familiar. It said this wasn't new. Natalie looked furious, but not sorry. Furious that I had disrupted the scene she wanted. She said, "What are you doing here?" I stared at her. "Are you serious?" She folded her arms and said, "You followed me to Raleigh." I said, "You lied to me for months." She shot back, "Maybe because every time I try to talk to you about how unhappy I've been, you shut down." There it was. The pivot, the retroactive justification. The marriage had problems, therefore the affair became emotionally understandable. I told her that if she was unhappy, she could have said so before turning herself into a part-time tourist with some guy named Gavin. She said we should go somewhere private. I said no, we were staying right there because I was done being managed. People were definitely noticing by then. Not a giant scene, but enough. A couple at the next table had gone very still. A server kept pretending to rearrange menus at a nearby stand. Natalie finally said, very coldly, "I didn't want it to happen like this." And that line told me more than almost anything else. Not "I'm sorry," not "I didn't mean to hurt you." Just that the timing and setting were inconvenient for her. I asked how long it had been going on. She said, "Since last summer." Almost a year. I sat down because my legs felt weak. Last summer was when she started making the monthly conference sound more fixed. Last summer was when Sophie started asking why mom always left before family movie night. Last summer was when Carter had a baseball tournament and Natalie missed the second game because of leadership dinners. I asked if Gavin worked with her. She hesitated and said, "Not directly." I said, "What does that mean?" She said he was a consultant her company used on a campaign rollout. I asked if her company knew. She said no. Of course they didn't. Then I asked the question I dreaded most. "Have you been staying here with him every month?" She looked away. I said, "Natalie?" She whispered, Mostly. Mostly. Not once, not a recent mistake, not a trip that crossed a line unexpectedly. A whole pattern. A ritual." I asked if she had ever actually attended a conference in Raleigh. She said, "The first couple times there really were meetings." That made me laugh in a way that probably sounded unhinged. Because of course, the lie had probably grown out of something real. The best ones do. At some point during all this, I became aware of one of the hotel employees nearby. A woman maybe in her late 20s, dark hair in a neat bun. Standing just far enough away to look busy but close enough to intervene if things got ugly. I would later learn her name was Marissa. At that moment, I barely registered her. Natalie asked me what I wanted her to say. I said the truth would be a nice change. She sat back down and said, "I didn't plan this." I told her people never seem to. Somehow cheating always just happens. In a hotel room they booked in advance. She looked tired then, like she was done performing. I was lonely, Ethan. That line hit me in a weird place because it was not entirely false. We had been drifting. I had buried myself in work plenty of times. I'm not saying I caused her affair, because I didn't. But marriage problems are rarely one-sided in every possible way. Still, loneliness does not make you invent 12 conferences. I asked if she loved him. She said, "I don't know." That hurt more than if she'd said yes. Yes would have at least been clean. "I don't know" meant she detonated our life for something so flimsy she couldn't even name it. Then she asked me to please lower my voice because this was humiliating. I remember staring at her and thinking, you have no idea what humiliating is. I left after that because there was nothing left to say in a hotel rooftop bar. I was halfway across the lobby when Marissa, the employee I'd barely noticed upstairs, came after me and quietly said, "Sir?" I turned around. She looked nervous, like she was already regretting saying anything. I'm sorry to stop you. I know this isn't my business. I said it was fine. She glanced toward the elevators and then said, I just felt like you should know this doesn't seem like a one-time thing. I don't know what my face did, but she immediately held up her hand like she was afraid I'd explode. She said, I'm not trying to make anything worse. It's just I recognized your wife because she's been here before. A lot. I asked, with him. She nodded. Then she said the line I haven't been able to shake since. She always asks for the same room. I think something in me actually went numb then. Not just a fair numb, ritual numb, preference numb, the kind of betrayal where somebody hasn't merely done a terrible thing, they have curated it. Marissa looked miserable. She said she only told me because she'd overheard enough upstairs to understand who I was. And because she'd once been cheated on and hated how many people around her knew before she did. I asked how many times. She said she couldn't say exactly. But enough that several front desk staff recognized Natalie on sight. Enough that the bartender once joked about, our monthly honeymoon couple. That was when I had to lean against a column in the lobby because I thought I might actually throw up. Marissa apologized again and said she shouldn't have said anything. I told her no, I was glad she did. I still am. She did in 30 seconds what my pride and denial had prevented me from doing for nearly a year. She gave me a truth I couldn't soften. I drove home in a fog. I picked the kids up from my mom's house. Carter wanted to know if we could get Bojangles because Nana's grilled cheese was weirdly soggy. Sophie had drawn me a picture of Moose wearing sunglasses. They were just normal. Bright, loud, alive, expecting the world to continue making sense. Natalie didn't come home that night. She texted around 8 saying she needed space and would be back in the morning so we could talk. The wording was unbelievable, like she was the one retreating to think after a mutual disagreement. I didn't answer. Dana came over after the kids went to bed because I finally called her and said, you were right. She brought a bottle of wine and took it right back to the kitchen when she saw my face because she knows me well enough to know when alcohol would only turn grief into a fire. I told her everything. The hotel, the dress, the guy, the employee. Dana listened quietly, then said, what do you want to do? I said I didn't know. That was true. People talk big online about immediate divorce, immediate exposure, immediate consequences. Real life is messier when there are children asleep upstairs and a shared mortgage and 10,000 ordinary memories stacked around the betrayal like furniture. Part of me wanted to change the locks. Part of me wanted Natalie to come home crying and somehow become the version of herself I thought I'd married. Part of me wanted to disappear for a week and not make a single decision. When she came back Saturday morning, she looked awful. Not in a satisfying way, just drained. She asked if the kids were around. I told her my mom had taken them to the park. We sat at the kitchen table like strangers negotiating a hostage exchange. She admitted everything then, or enough of everything. Gavin was a consultant she met through a product launch. They started texting during a stretch when, in her version, we were barely functioning as partners. She said it felt exciting to talk to someone who saw her as more than a mom managing orthodontist appointments and school forms. I said plenty of people feel unseen without booking monthly sex weekends. She flinched, but she didn't deny it. She said the first hotel trip had been tied to real meetings in Raleigh and they'd extended it by a night. After that, they built the lie around the truth because it was easy. Her company really did have irregular regional events, so no one questioned it. Eventually the actual meetings stopped and she kept using the excuse anyway. I asked if she ever felt sick lying to the kids. She cried then and said yes. I asked if that stopped her. No answer. I asked if she loved him. She said, I think I loved how I felt around him. Again, maybe honest, but not useful. Then came the part one still replay because it was maybe the most selfish thing she said. She told me she had been planning to end it. Not because of guilt. Because Gavin had started pressuring her to make real decisions, and she didn't want to blow up the family. So apparently I was one more month, maybe 2, away from being gifted her decision to stop cheating on me after she got tired of the logistics. I actually laughed. She got angry at that and said I was making her sound evil. I said I didn't need to make her sound like anything. She asked if there was any way we could try counseling before I made up my mind. She said 11 years had to mean more than the worst thing she'd ever done. That sentence sat with me because I knew what she wanted it to do. It invited me to see the affair as a terrible chapter inside a bigger love story. The problem was, Once I saw the hotel in my mind, once I pictured her asking for the same room. It stopped feeling like a chapter and started feeling like its own parallel marriage. One I'd been paying for without knowing. I told her I needed time. She moved into the guest room that night. Then a week later into a short-term rental apartment near South Park. To reduce tension. That was her phrase. Reduce tension. We told the kids she was staying somewhere else for a little while because mom and dad were having grown-up problems. Carter took it badly in a quiet way. Sophie cried loudly and asked if she had done something wrong. That nearly killed me. Natalie wanted to keep things vague. I refused to poison the kids against her. But I also refused to act like this was some neutral scheduling issue. I told them mom broke some important promises and we were trying to figure out what happened next. That was all. The following weeks were awful in the boring ways nobody prepares you for. Lawyers, financial statements, school pickup logistics, Natalie sending long texts alternating between apology and self-justification. Her mother calling me to say marriages can survive infidelity if both people are willing to work. My mother saying if I took Natalie back, she'd support me. But she'd never trust her around me again. Carter asked once if mom's conference was the reason they were fighting. That meant he had connected enough dots to scare me. I asked why he said that. He shrugged and said, because she always came back from those trips acting weird. Like extra nice. Kids notice more than we think. Then more truth came out. One afternoon I was going through our mail pile and found a statement for a credit card I rarely used. There were charges linked to months Natalie had supposedly been at cheaper company booked hotels, flowers delivered to Raleigh, a spa charge at the Hanover, a dinner at a steakhouse so expensive I would have complained about it for 3 months. She had not just cheated, she had romanticized it. When I confronted her, she said she'd paid some of it back from her personal account. Like embezzlement math would help. I asked if Gavin was married. She said divorced. Somehow that made me hate him less and more at the same time. Less because at least he wasn't wrecking a second house. More because it meant he had no excuse not to understand exactly what he was stepping into. A month later, I met with a divorce attorney. I didn't tell Natalie until after the consultation. She cried again and said I was moving too fast. Too fast, after a year of lies. That phrase told me everything I needed to know about how differently we were experiencing reality. Around that same time, Sophie said something that decided me more than the attorney ever could. Natalie had come by for dinner so we could try a normal family evening for the kids. She was helping Sophie with a puzzle in the living room while I cleaned up the kitchen. I heard Sophie ask, very casually, "Mom, do you still go to conferences?" There was a long pause. Then Natalie said, "Not right now, sweetheart." Sophie said, "Good, I hated when you went." Later that night, after Natalie left, I asked Sophie why she said that. She looked embarrassed and said, "Because you seemed sad before she even left." That wrecked me more than some of the bigger moments. All those times I thought I was hiding my discomfort, I wasn't. The kids had been living inside the weather of our marriage longer than I realized. I filed for divorce in August. Natalie was furious at first, then devastated. Then eerily cooperative once she realized I wasn't bluffing. We've been navigating custody since then. There haven't been ugly screaming matches. No plates thrown, no cops. Just the colder kind of damage where two people who used to know each other's coffee orders start talking through calendars and attorneys. She says she ended things with Gavin right after I caught them. I believe her, mostly because I don't care enough to verify. The affair itself stopped mattering as much as the months of deception that made it possible. The wildest part, and maybe the reason I'm writing this here, is that I still sometimes catch myself missing her in very normal ways. Not the hotel version of her. The wife who knew how I liked my burgers done. The mom who sang too loud in the car. The woman who used to fall asleep halfway through movies with her hand on my leg. Betrayal would be easier if the person became a cartoon villain overnight. Usually they don't. Usually they stay painfully recognizable. Dana says that's why people get stuck. Because you keep looking for the familiar person inside the one who hurt you. Maybe she's right. A few weeks ago, I had to drive to Raleigh for an actual vendor meeting. On the way back, without even thinking, I took the exit that leads toward downtown and felt my chest tighten so suddenly I had to pull over. In a pharmacy parking lot, I just sat there staring at the steering wheel like an idiot. It's insane how your body can remember a place before your brain does. And stupidly, the person I thought about in that moment was not Natalie. It was Marissa, the hotel employee. I know that sounds strange, but I kept thinking about how many people must have seen my wife there over the months and said nothing because it wasn't their business. Which I understand, it wasn't, and yet one stranger looked at me in the lobby and decided I deserved the truth even if it made her uncomfortable. I never got to properly thank her. I think I mumbled something and then stumbled out like a man having a small medical event. Part of me has wanted to call the hotel and send a thank you somehow. But another part thinks that would be weird and maybe get her in trouble. So I haven't. The practical mess is still ongoing. Our house is on the market because neither of us can afford to buy the other out comfortably at current rates. Carter wants to know if his new room will still fit his baseball posters. Sophie wants to make sure Moose lives with me most of the time because he gets nervous in apartments, which is not true. But I'm not arguing with the logic if it gets me the dog more often. Natalie and I are trying to keep things civil for the kids. Most days we manage it. Some days she says things that still light me up. Like when she asked if I had to tell Dana the full story because now her family looks at me like I'm a monster. I said maybe she should have considered that before becoming one at a rooftop bar. Not my best moment, but not my worst either. I haven't told the kids the specifics and I don't plan to unless a therapist someday says it's necessary. They deserve to have their own relationship with her without me pouring adult ugliness into it. But I also refuse to do that thing where everyone protects the cheating spouse so hard that the betrayed one starts looking unstable for not pretending. My close friends know. My family knows. Her parents know enough. Gavin's name exists now in my phone only because my lawyer told me to preserve everything. As for me, I'm functioning. That's the best word. I get the kids to school. I go to work. I sign forms. I remember Spirit Week themes. I took Carter to a batting cage on Tuesday and spent an hour feeding tokens into a machine while he tried to fix his swing. I helped Sophie make a poster about sea turtles for summer camp. I unclogged a sink. I bought detergent. I live this weird split life where one half is catastrophe and the other half is making sure there are enough waffles in the freezer. Sometimes that feels absurd. Sometimes it's the only reason I'm okay. The part one still can't fully process is how deliberate the lie was. If Natalie had a one-night stand after getting drunk at some work event, I honestly think I'd understand it emotionally more than this. Not forgive it, but understand it. This was logistics, repetition, costume changes, calendar management. It was my wife building a second life inside the first one and trusting me to never look directly at it. And I didn't, until I finally did. If I'm being honest, I think I'm writing this because I spent so many months arguing myself out of my own instincts that I barely trust my judgment now. Even after seeing her with him, even after hearing from Marissa, even after the admissions. There are moments I think maybe I should have fought harder for counseling first. Maybe blowing up the marriage over an affair is exactly what everyone says not to do if kids are involved, and reconciliation is possible. Then I remember the way she answered when I asked how long. I remember. Mostly, I remember. The same room. I remember my son asking why mom's work trips always happened when he had something important. I remember my daughter saying she hated the conferences before she had words for why. And I know this didn't start with a bad night. It became part of our family architecture. So that's where I am. Separated, filing, trying to keep the kids steady. Trying not to let the anger turn me into my father. And still shocked by how a stranger in a hotel lobby ended up being the first person to treat me like I deserved the truth. I haven't dated. I can barely remember to schedule dentist appointments. I don't want revenge. I don't want some dramatic exposure scene. I mostly want my kids to come out of this with as little damage as possible and for me to stop replaying every monthly conference in my head like there was one clue that should have made me smarter sooner. There probably were 100 clues. I just loved her enough to keep translating them into something else. Story number 6. My flight was supposedly delayed until a stranger handed me a photo of my husband at another gate. I still feel stupid when I think about how normal that morning started. Because if it had started badly, maybe I would have been more alert. Maybe I would have noticed something sooner. Maybe I would not have spent half a day smiling at my husband like we were one of those couples who had finally figured life out after years of struggling. Instead, it started with coffee, our dog barking at the mail truck, and my husband Ethan standing in the kitchen in his socks, kissing my cheek while he flipped a piece of toast over on a paper towel because he said he did not have time to wash another plate. We had been married 6 years. I was 33 and Ethan was 35. We lived outside Columbus in a townhouse that was nice enough to make us feel grown up and small. Enough that every fight echoed into every room. We had not been fighting much lately though, which made what happened worse in a way. If we had been on the rocks, I could have told myself I should have seen it coming. But we were in that calm stretch where you start trusting the quiet again. The trip was supposed to be simple. My younger sister Lauren had her first baby in Phoenix, and I had been planning to visit for weeks. Ethan was supposed to come with me for the first 3 days because he had a work conference in Scottsdale right after. We were going to fly out together, spend the weekend with my sister. Then he would take a shuttle to his conference hotel while I stayed with Lauren a few more days. We had even joked that it would be the first semi-romantic trip we had taken in years. If you counted changing diapers near cactuses as romance. The only wrinkle was that Ethan had been acting weird about the itinerary. Not rude, not cold, just scattered. He kept asking me what terminal we were leaving from even though I had forwarded him the confirmation twice. He asked me if I was checking a bag, then asked again the next day. The night before the flight he spent almost an hour on his laptop in the guest room with the door closed. When I walked in to ask if he wanted takeout, he jerked the screen down so fast that I laughed and asked if he was buying me a secret anniversary gift. He smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. And he said it was just work stuff and he did not want me seeing confidential client names. That should have bothered me more than it did. Instead, I was relieved because I had been worried he was doing something worse. Like tracking our budget and finding out how much baby stuff I had already shipped to Lauren. There is something embarrassing about how often women talk themselves into the safer explanation. Just because it hurts less in the moment. We got to the airport too early because Ethan always liked padding travel time. He was one of those people who believed arriving exactly when advised was somehow reckless and disrespectful to aviation. I checked my bag, he carried his backpack and roller suitcase. And we made it through security without any real issue. He even bought me the gross overpriced yogurt parfait I like from one of those airport grab-and-go places because he said vacation calories did not count. I remember thinking I wanted to take a picture of him standing there with that stupid parfait and his conference badge holder around his neck because he looked so familiar and safe. Our flight to Phoenix was scheduled for 10:40 a.m. Around 9:50 the board at our gate switched to delayed. At first it said maintenance review, then it said updated departure time pending. Everyone around us did the same thing airport people always do when their plans start slipping. They looked up, looked back down. Then started opening apps like information was going to appear faster for the people who refreshed the most aggressively. Ethan did not react the way I expected. He groaned too loudly, then stood up and said he was going to find an agent to ask what was going on. That also was not unusual because he hated uncertainty. What was unusual was how long he stayed gone. 10 minutes passed, then 15. I texted him asking if he found anyone. He wrote back, "Line is insane, might check another desk." I wrote, "Okay, I'm at the seats by the charging station." He liked the message and that was it. When he came back he looked flushed. He told me the plane had a crew issue and the delay could be anywhere from 40 minutes to 2 hours. Then he said something that was the first real pinprick in the whole day. He said, "Honestly, you should probably stay here in case they suddenly board. I'll walk around and see if there's another coffee place with actual food." I asked why he would leave again if boarding could happen anytime. And he said because he was starving and irritated and did not want to be trapped in the gate area eating pretzels. He leaned down, kissed the top of my head, and said he would not go far. If I stop the story right there and read it back to myself, the answer seems obvious. But in the moment I was tired and trusting and staring at a delay screen in an airport where nobody wants to believe their own life could possibly be more dramatic than everyone else's. I just nodded and told him to bring me water. About 20 minutes after that, an older woman sat beside me. She had short silver hair, a navy cardigan, and one of those tote bags from a museum gift shop. I noticed her mostly because she looked like she knew exactly where she was going and why, which made her stand out in an airport full of people who always seem half lost. She sat down, glanced at the departure board, then looked at me and asked if I was waiting on Phoenix too. I said yes, and she made a face like she did not believe me. Then she said, "That is strange." I laughed a little and asked what was strange. She pulled her phone out and said, "I just came from the B concourse because my gate got changed twice." I could have sworn I saw that flight number over there showing on time. I told her maybe it was a codeshare or another route, and she shrugged and said maybe. Then she studied me for a second, in that very direct older woman way, and asked, "Is your husband tall, dark hair, blue button-down, black roller bag?" My whole body went cold in a way that was so fast it felt chemical. I said, "Yeah, why?" She looked immediately uncomfortable, like she regretted speaking at all. Then she said, "I'm sorry, maybe I'm mistaken." I asked her again why. She hesitated, then unlocked her phone and held it out. I took this because I was trying to send my daughter proof that the airport signs were ridiculous. And I'd walked all the way to the wrong gate for nothing. I snapped a photo of the board and the gate area. "I think your husband is in it." He was. The photo was taken maybe 10 minutes earlier. The flight board behind him clearly showed a departure to Nashville at gate B14. Ethan was standing near the desk, facing partly sideways. And next to him was a woman in a cream trench coat with one hand on his arm like they were together. Not brushing against each other by accident. Not strangers in the same frame. Together, close enough that the space between them looked already occupied by history. I remember not breathing right. Not dramatic movie style. Just physically forgetting what to do next. My ears started ringing and the gate around me got strangely bright. I zoomed in on the photo with shaking fingers and saw Ethan's profile, his suitcase, his watch. The exact shirt I had ironed while listening to a podcast the night before. The woman asked if I was okay and I heard myself say, "Can you send me that?" She nodded immediately. I texted her my number. Her name was Denise. She sent the image and then asked if I wanted her to stay with me. I said no, mostly because I did not want a witness to whatever I did next. I called Ethan right away. He picked up on the second ring and sounded irritated, like I was inconveniencing him. "Hey babe, where are you? Still looking for food?" "No, where are you?" A pause. "Near the other side of the terminal." "Why?" "Because the lines are shorter." "What is going on?" "I have a picture of you at B14. Another pause, longer this time. Then he laughed. Actually laughed. "What?" "I have a picture of you at B14 standing with a woman." "Do not lie to me." He did not answer for a second. And then he said the sentence that shattered the last piece of normal left in the day. "Stay where you are, I can explain. No innocent person says that." I stood up so fast I nearly knocked my carry-on over. I told him, "No, you stay where you are," and I hung up. At that point any sane person would probably call a friend, an airport employee. Maybe security if they thought something dangerous was happening. I did what angry, humiliated women in movies do. Except I was actually living it and there was no soundtrack to make it look empowering. I grabbed my bag and marched to the tram toward the B concourse with tears already collecting in my eyes and that sick adrenaline that makes you feel both dizzy and laser-focused. On the ride over, Ethan called me 3 times. I ignored all of them. Then he texted, "Please let me explain before you make this worse." That made me so mad I almost laughed. Worse for who? Worse than finding your husband apparently trying to board a different flight with another woman, while telling you your shared flight was delayed. When I got to B14, the gate area was crowded with people lining up by boarding group. I scanned the whole space and did not see him at first. Then I saw the woman from the photo near the windows, still in the cream coat. Dark blonde hair pulled into a clip, talking to a gate agent. Ethan was nowhere around. I walked straight up to her and said, "Where is he?" She turned around slowly. There was a split second where I saw recognition in her face, which told me everything I needed to know. She knew exactly who I was. Not only who I was, what I was. She did not play dumb. She just looked exhausted and said, "I don't know." I said, "You do know." She looked past me and then back at me. "You're his wife." Not a question. The fact that she said it so flatly, like she was confirming a package delivery, made my stomach turn. "Yes," I said, "I am. So tell me where my husband is." She pressed her lips together. "He said you weren't here." For a second I thought I had misheard her. Then anger hit so hard it almost steadied me. "I am here." I was sitting at a delayed gate for a Phoenix flight he was supposedly still taking. With me. So again, where is he? She looked honestly rattled now. "He went to the restroom when you called." I stared at her. She stared back, and what I saw on her face was not smugness or guilt exactly. It was dread, real dread, like she was starting to realize she had not been part of a romantic secret. She had been standing inside a collapsing lie. I asked her what her name was. She said, "Claire." I asked Claire how long she had known Ethan. She looked around at all the people boarding behind her and said, "I don't think this is the place." I said, "Then you should have picked a different gate." That got the attention of a few people nearby. A man waiting to board glanced over and then stared very hard at his phone. Claire took a step to the side and I followed her. She was maybe my age, maybe a little younger. Wearing nice jeans and loafers and a gold ring on her right hand that looked like one of those rings you buy for yourself after a breakup. She said, quietly, "He told me he was separated." I laughed in her face. I wish I had done something more elegant, but I laughed because it was either that or scream. "Of course he did." She shook her head. "He told me you two were basically done and living separately until the house situation was figured out. We slept in the same bed last night." Her expression changed in this small horrible way, like a floor giving out. "What? We drove here together this morning." She looked like she might actually throw up. I wish I could say I felt triumphant, but I mostly felt stupid and hot and shaky. There is no real satisfaction in watching another woman realize your husband used her too. It just spreads the humiliation around. I asked her how she met him. She said they met 8 months earlier at a hotel bar in Cincinnati when she was there visiting her brother. Ethan had been there for a work dinner. They kept talking after. According to her, he told her he had been married young, it had not worked. And he was in that ugly in-between stage where lawyers were involved and everything was emotionally over before it was legally over. He said he traveled a lot for work, which made seeing each other in different cities normal. He said he could not post much online because his ex was vindictive and liked using social media against him in divorce discussions. I actually had to lean against a pillar at that point because it was so textbook and so insulting. Not even creative, just the same sad script men pass around like a community theater production. I asked why they were flying to Nashville. She said Ethan told her he had a few free days before his conference and wanted to spend them with her. They were supposed to stay at a boutique hotel downtown and then he would fly to Scottsdale. From there, she showed me her phone without me even asking. There were texts from him, photos, messages about missing her, a hotel confirmation with both their names on it. One message from him that morning said, "Once I get clear of the gate mess I can breathe." That one hit me harder than almost anything else because while I was sitting there guarding our fake delayed flight, he was talking about getting clear of me like I was traffic. I asked Claire if she knew he was supposed to be on a Phoenix flight with his wife that same morning. She said no. Then she said, in a small voice, "I'm so sorry." I believed her, which made it worse in a more adult way. Villains are easier to hate than fellow casualties. My phone rang again. "Ethan." I answered this time. "What?" His voice was low and urgent. "Where are you?" "At the gate with Claire." Silence. Then, "Nora, lower your voice and listen to me." That was another insane thing for him to say. I do not know why cheating men always think their wives become public relations problems instead of betrayed human beings. I said, "Come here." He said, "Not there." "Come here." He exhaled. "This is not what it looks like." Claire let out this short, unbelieving laugh beside me. I said, "It looks like you lied to both of us for months and tried to send me to Phoenix alone, while you flew to Nashville with your girlfriend." He snapped, "She is not my girlfriend." Claire recoiled like he had slapped her. That was the moment something in me stopped wanting answers and started wanting evidence. I told him, "Good. Keep saying things like that. I'm taking notes now." Then I hung up. Claire asked me what I wanted to do. It was such a strange question because a few minutes earlier she probably thought she was about to board a romantic getaway with my husband. And now she was asking me for direction like we had been thrown together by a storm. I told her I wanted every message, every email, every reservation confirmation he had sent her. She asked why. I said because at that exact moment I did not know if I needed a divorce lawyer, a financial advisor, or a restraining order. She blinked at that and forwarded me everything she could while the gate agent kept announcing final boarding for Nashville. Then Ethan appeared. He came walking fast from the far end of the concourse, red-faced, scanning the area. The instant he saw us together, his whole expression changed from panic to calculation. I watched him do it in real time. He straightened his shoulders, slowed down, and put on the face he used whenever he thought he could manage a difficult room. He walked up like he was the calm one, like he had arrived to help. "Nora." I stepped back before he could touch me. Claire said, "You told me you were divorced." He glanced at her, then back at me. "Can we not do this here?" I said, "No, Let's definitely do this here. He clenched his jaw. You were making a scene. You were making plans. That landed. A few people nearby were absolutely listening now. One woman with a stroller actually turned her whole body toward us. I should have been embarrassed, but I had passed the point where social rules still felt relevant. Ethan lowered his voice and said, I was going to tell you. When? Before or after Nashville? It was complicated. Complicated as our internet bill. This is cheating. Claire crossed her arms and said, 8 months of cheating. He shot her a furious look. Do not. She actually laughed then, bitter and sharp. Do not what? Stop existing now that your wife knows. He said her name like a warning. And I saw something ugly in him that I had somehow managed not to fully see in 6 years. Not just dishonesty, contempt. He genuinely believed he should be the one controlling the temperature of a disaster he created. I asked him one question that had been crawling through my brain since I saw the photo. Was the Phoenix flight ever delayed? He hesitated. That was enough. It had not been. He had either changed the booking somehow or lied about the display or found some temporary glitch and built a whole plan around it. Later I learned the truth was even more pathetic. He had separately booked his own Nashville flight weeks earlier, intending to tell me at the airport that he needed to stay behind because of an emergency work issue once I was already checked in and heading to Phoenix. The delay at my gate had happened by chance and actually helped him because it kept me seated in confused longer than his original excuse probably would have. I asked him if he had planned for me to fly to my sister's alone while he disappeared with Claire. He said, I was going to meet you later. Claire said, you told me you would be with me until Tuesday. He rubbed both hands over his face. I can explain all of this. I said, then explain why you used our shared credit card for a hotel with her. His eyes flicked to Claire, who clearly had not known that either. That told me enough, so I asked the next one. Explain why you told her I was your vindictive ex. Claire inhaled sharply. He stared at her like betrayal had somehow flowed upward from her to him. Then he said the most selfish thing of the entire day. I was trying to avoid hurting everyone. I actually felt my expression change. It was like my face went still while the rest of me burned. No, you were trying to avoid consequences. He looked at me, finally, like he realized I was no longer persuadable. Then he switched tactics and softened his voice. Nora, please, let's go somewhere private and talk. I said, I'm not going anywhere private with you. And maybe that sounds dramatic. But in that moment privacy felt like a weapon he had always used well. Privacy was where he got to frame things, edit things, soften things, make me feel unreasonable. Make me focus on his stress and his intentions and his childhood and his workload until his choices became weather instead of actions. I was done giving him rooms where he could rewrite reality. He told Claire to leave. She told him to go to hell. I almost respected her for that. The gate agent called final boarding one last time and Claire looked at the line. Then back at Ethan, then at me. She said, I'm not getting on that plane. He looked startled. Claire, she said, do not say my name like we are still doing this. Then she picked up her carry-on and walked away from both of us toward the seating area across the concourse. Just like that, the little fantasy weekend he had built was gone. Ethan turned back to me and tried one more time to touch my arm. I moved away again and told him to stop. At that point he became angry in a more open way. His voice sharpened. What exactly do you want right now? I said, your phone. He laughed once. Absolutely not. Then I want your car keys and the house key. Nora. Now. He stared at me, probably calculating again. Probably realizing that refusing outright would make him look even worse if I escalated. So he tossed me the house key and car key from his pocket, but kept the phone. I told him I wanted the credit card too. He said it was also his card. I said not for the next few days it was not, and I would be freezing it as soon as I sat down. A man walking past us muttered, good for her, under his breath. Which would have embarrassed me if I were not so close to shaking apart. I asked Ethan where my boarding pass was because he had been holding both digital copies on his app. When we checked in together, he sighed like I was being difficult and forwarded me the pass. Then I told him I was still going to Phoenix and he was not coming with me. He asked how I was getting there if I missed boarding. That was when I looked back at the departure board and realized with a surreal jolt that my original flight was still in a delayed status. I almost laughed. The fake part of my day had collapsed, but the real delay was somehow still there, waiting. I told him that sounded like my problem now, not his. He said, you cannot seriously be making decisions like this while emotional. There are phrases men use that should legally count as gasoline. That was one of them. I stepped in closer and said, very quietly, I am making decisions exactly because I am emotional. Ethan, because emotions are what tell normal people this is unforgivable. He went quiet after that. I walked away first. He did not follow me immediately. Which told me he either thought I would cool off or he was too busy figuring out his next lie for the next person. I went back to my original concourse in a daze, sat at the gate, and called my sister. Lauren picked up on the second ring, already half breathless because she had the baby in one arm. She asked if we had boarded yet. I started crying so hard I could not answer for a few seconds. She got very still on the line and kept saying my name. When I finally told her Ethan had another woman and had been trying to fly to Nashville with her, while I sat at the wrong gate, Lauren said, I will literally drive to the airport and kill him. That was not helpful, but it was loving. Then the practical part of her brain kicked in. She told me to screenshot every message, save every receipt, and not let him back into our accounts before I talked to someone. Her husband Marcus got on the line and asked if I needed him to book me another flight from his side just in case. I said maybe. He said done anyway. I spent the next hour doing things with numb hands. I moved money from our joint checking into my personal account. Not everything, but enough that I would not be stranded if he tried something stupid. I froze the shared credit card through the app. I changed the password on my email. I texted my friend Olivia and asked if she could go to my house later and check on the dog if needed. I sent myself the photo Denise took, all of Claire's forwarded messages, hotel confirmations, screenshots of his lies. There is something chilling about how administrative betrayal becomes once the crying pauses. Ethan texted me several times during all of this. Can we please talk? You are overreacting. Claire knew things were complicated. I never intended to humiliate you. Please do not involve other people yet. That last one was almost funny because by then at least 6 people were already involved, including one unsuspecting stranger with a museum tote who had detonated his entire secret life by being observant. I never replied. Eventually he called from a different number. Probably an airport courtesy phone or maybe Claire's if she had not completely cut him off yet. I answered only because I thought there might be some emergency with our house or dog. Instead he said, are you really going to tell your family before we even talk? I said, I already did. He swore under his breath. Then he said, you are acting like this is black and white. I said, because it is. He started into some long explanation about loneliness and feeling disconnected and how the last year had been hard and he had not known how to talk to me because every conversation at home felt practical and tired. I remember staring at the departure board while he tried to turn his affair into a symptom of emotional neglect. That is when I interrupted him and asked one question. Did you sleep with her? He paused. I said, any answer besides yes is a waste of both our time. He said yes. I hung up again. There is a point in some disasters where more information stops changing the shape of things. It just deepens the crater. I had reached that point. I did not need his motivations. I did not need the timeline refined to the week or the month. I did not need to know whether he loved her, or if there had been others, or if he had used the same hotel bar story on someone before. I needed distance and a lawyer and a shower and a version of myself that did not feel like she had been standing in public with invisible clown makeup on for the last year. My flight finally boarded almost 2 hours late. I got on alone. Sitting in my seat without Ethan next to me was one of the saddest parts of the whole thing because it made the loss feel ordinary. There was the empty middle seat for a while, then someone else took it. And just like that, the space where my husband was supposed to be got filled by a stranger eating trail mix and watching a true crime documentary. Life does that. It does not pause because your own story just cracked open. Halfway through the flight I looked through more of the messages Claire had sent. She had included dates, screenshots, even photos he had taken in hotel rooms I did not recognize. In one thread he told her he wanted a clean start once everything is finalized. In another he complained that I made every decision into a committee meeting, which was rich coming from a man running 2 parallel relationships like a deeply mediocre project manager. Then I found something that changed the situation from awful to legally interesting. One of the hotel confirmations was for a weekend in Chicago 3 months earlier. The exact same weekend Ethan told me he was in Cleveland helping his cousin through a messy separation. I remembered that trip because he had asked me to cover an unusually large transfer from savings into checking beforehand. saying his cousin needed a short-term loan and he wanted to help privately without embarrassing him. I had trusted him and moved the money. The booking cost was almost identical to what he had asked me to transfer. I searched our account history and found it. $4,000. Maybe there was an explanation for part of it, but not all of it. Not with everything else. Not with the flights, the hotels, the dinners. Suddenly I was not just dealing with cheating. I was dealing with possible financial fraud inside my own marriage. Or at the very least a man who thought joint funds meant money he could launder into his secret life as long as he sounded compassionate while asking for it. By the time I landed in Phoenix, I had gone from devastated to cold. Lauren and Marcus were waiting for me at arrivals with the baby in the stroller. The second I saw my sister, I cried again. She hugged me with one arm and held the car seat with the other and kept repeating, "I know, I know, I know." Marcus took my bag without saying much because he is one of those good men who understands there are moments when silence is the most respectful form of support. That night, after the baby finally fell asleep, I sat at their kitchen island and went through everything from the day while Lauren made tea I did not want, and Marcus looked up the name of a good family attorney back home. I told them about Denise, about Claire, about the photo, the Nashville gate, the messages, the possible money issue. Lauren kept getting angrier in waves. Marcus just got more focused. He told me to stop communicating with Ethan except in writing and not to tip him off yet about the money angle until I had legal advice. Ethan texted again around midnight Arizona time. "I'm at the house. We need to talk before you make this irreversible." I wrote back my first response of the day. "You made it irreversible at B14. Then I turned my phone over and let him sit with that. The next morning I woke up to 23 messages from him, 2 missed calls from his mother, and 1 message from Claire that just said, "I'm sorry for my part in this. I truly did not know. If you need any statement from me about what he told me, I will provide it." That message mattered more than she probably realized. Not because I wanted revenge through her, but because lies hate witnesses who compare notes. I still have Denise's photo saved in a folder I labeled with the date. Sometimes I look at it and think about how one woman's random camera roll captured the exact second my marriage became evidence. Not ended, because I think maybe it had ended in reality months before and I was just the last one informed, but evidence, proof, something solid in a day that otherwise felt like gaslighting turned into architecture. The weirdest part is that if Ethan had just told me he wanted out, I would have been crushed but eventually grateful. We did not have kids. We had equity in a house, some savings, a dog, 2 cars, and a life that could have been split with pain but also dignity. Instead, he built this pathetic maze of half-lies and airport theatrics and romantic side trips. And now every decent memory I have of our last year feels infected. I keep replaying small moments I dismissed. The extra workouts. The sudden interest in buying nicer shirts for work trips. The way he turned his phone face down more often. The random tenderness after coming home from travel, like guilt translated into affection. People always say hindsight is 20/20, but honestly hindsight is crueler than that. It is not clarity. It is a scavenger hunt through your own humiliation. If you are wondering whether I ever got the full truth from him, the answer is not really. People like Ethan do not confess cleanly. They leak facts around the edges of proof. Every time you corner one lie, they downgrade it into a smaller lie and act like progress is happening. First it is, "We were just talking," then, "Okay, we kissed," then, "Fine, we were seeing each other but I was going to end it." Then, "It only got serious because our marriage was already broken." And before long you are standing in a swamp of edited language designed to keep them from ever having to say the simple ugly sentence that matters. "I cheated because I wanted to, and I assumed I could manage the fallout." He still has not said it that plainly. What I know for sure is this. There were at least 8 months with Claire. There may have been more before that with someone else. He used shared money in ways I did not authorize. He lied to her about me, lied to me about work, and tried to orchestrate a whole side trip while physically accompanying me to another flight like I was luggage he needed to route correctly before his real weekend began. That level of compartmentalization is the part one cannot get over. Not the sex, not even the romance, but the logistics of deceit. The calmness, the confidence, the way he kissed my forehead and asked if I wanted water before going to meet another woman at another gate. That image makes me feel crazier than anything else. I do not know if Denise understands how much her choice mattered. She could have kept quiet. Most people would have. Airports are full of things that are not your business. Instead, she trusted her own instincts enough to ask one awkward question and show one uncomfortable photo to a stranger who looked like she might need it. I think about that a lot too. How many lives depend on people being willing to make one socially inconvenient choice? So that is what happened. I went to the airport with my husband and found out by accident from a stranger's phone that he was trying to board a different flight with a different woman after telling me ours was delayed. I confronted them both at the gate. She did not know the truth. He knew all of it. I got on my actual flight alone. And somewhere between Columbus and Phoenix I stopped thinking of my marriage as a broken promise and started thinking of it as a crime scene with really bad acting.